Never forget.
They may not be stories you want to remember, but they remain part of our history. History that helped shape and mold our justice system, how we raise our children, even how we see the world. In a three-part series of special reports only on KTTC, our Barrett Leone takes a look back at some of the state's most notorious killers and their crimes. Tonight, we start with a violent quadruple homicide. It happened right here in Rochester more than 33 years ago. Our Barrett Leone joins us in our studio, and she investigates the Brom murders. Barrett.
Well, Tom, Caitlin, when you think of notorious Minnesota crimes, the Brom murders are at the top of the list. For the first time, KTTC spoke with a close family friend of the Broms. If you've lived in Rochester long enough, you've heard the name.
This is him on his way to prison. This is the last time Rochester saw him.
Brom. You've probably read the headlines.
5 lives that are gone. I mean, they're literally gone.
Remember the reports.
The question Olmsted County authorities must decide now is whether to charge David Brom as a juvenile or as an adult.
And watch the Brom family murder story play out on national television.
Good evening. Topping tonight's News 11, police charge a 16-year-old boy with 4 counts of first-degree murder after his family is found axed to death in their Rochester home.
Patty Price lived it.
It was a crazy, awful experience.
In the middle of the night on February 18th, 1988, 16-year-old David Brom killed 4 of his family members. His parents, Bernard and Paulette, and younger siblings, 14-year-old Diane and 9-year-old Rick, all murdered with an axe.
I had only just been to their house for a sleepover the weekend before.
Price, an 8th grader at the time, remembers it vividly. Diane was her best friend.
I remember the day that she didn't show up. It was a Thursday, and she didn't show up that day, and I didn't really think that much of it.
She remembers her mother breaking the news to her that night.
I don't know how to tell you this, but Diane is dead. My life kind of was before that moment and then after that moment from that point on.
The next day, Price went to school alongside her classmates in a fog, even cleaning out Diane's desk with another friend.
I was convinced 100% that David was out. He had walked in on the murders and fled.
Before David turned himself in that Friday.
Even at that point, I was like, somebody's got a gun to his head. He was like a brother to me. I mean, he was nicer than my brothers, to be honest.
David was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder. Shock and grief saturated the Rochester community.
This is obviously the shock phase. It's beginning to set in.
It's just, a shock to the whole community. Everyone's talking about it, wondering why.
Come Monday, St. Pius bused students to the funeral.
I remember we had to sit with our class, and there were 4 caskets brought in, of course, all closed. All that I could think of what was on the inside of those caskets. What did the bodies look like? And it was just trauma after trauma, and no help to be found.
Olmsted County Sheriff Kevin Togerson was one of the first responding deputies on scene.
I got up maybe 4, 5, 6 steps, and then I could see 2 sets of feet laying at the top of the steps.
30 years later, in 2018, he spoke with KTTC about the day.
When this happened to the Brom family, there was a very heightened response and involvement, and there was a lot of things going on. The schools were more involved, the school counselors were more involved, trying to help and support families and things like that.
But Price remembers that time in her life differently.
And I remember really people telling us not to talk about it.
It took her until her mid-30s before she felt she could talk about the tragedy publicly.
From age 13, when the murders happened, till age 32, was massively shaped by the murders.
All these years later, she says she's never once blamed David.
Have never had anything but compassion for him and wondered what the reason was. I have written to him a couple times over the years, probably about 6 times.
David is now 49 years old at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Stillwater, and the motive behind his crimes is something he's never revealed.
I think everybody involved with that case asks themselves that question, and I have no answer.
But Price has her own ideas.
Well, I have all sorts of theories on what was happening with David, having to do with priests, to be honest. But David has never been willing to talk about it. He talks about how much he misses his family. He talks about how, he really regrets snapping the way he did. And he talks about how much they loved him, and he very much misses them.
Price is an advocate for mental health and a practicing psychologist here in Rochester. She says if it wasn't for the Brom murders, she wouldn't be as compassionate or even in the same field she's in. She hopes to get the courage to visit David at the Stillwater facility someday. If you'd like to hear more of her interview, head to KTTC.com. And I'll continue our 3-part series tomorrow night looking into a case that haunts parents to this day. Join me tomorrow at 10 for the Jacob Wetterling case and how it has changed missing children cases today.
All right, hello. Let me check if they started the hearing yet.
Back downtown Rochester is becoming a hub for people who love salsa.
Let's start. All right, so it still hasn't begun yet. I'm gonna try to refresh it really quick to check if there's any updates on that. And let me see here, just give me a moment. We're gonna go dark for a moment, but I'm here. So what is it? Oh, you know what? 9:50, 11:15. Let me see here. So they still haven't started the hearing. I guess they're running behind. Let me double check. Let me check the local time. I think it should be 11:30 already. It should have started 15 minutes ago in Minnesota. Just give me a moment here. Minnesota. So right now it's 11:32, so this should have started 15 minutes ago. Huh, I wonder what's happening. Anyhow, I guess I'll just leave it on the screen and hopefully it starts. If it doesn't, then I'll go ahead and cut it. But if not, then I guess we'll catch it on the rebound.
Was in line for that step if it was the eventual case. So,
can you talk about what makes you feel you're ready for that kind of a move?
Sure, it's definitely multifaceted. I think first and foremost, my consistent work within corrections to be prepared. Mentally, emotionally, and physically, to go out into the community to work, to establish myself as a member of the community and society. A lot of the programming that I was able to take during my incarceration, a lot of the work that I did in getting ready mentally, getting ready emotionally, my work in therapy or different programmings like restorative justice and building character, educational opportunities, and a lot of the things I received from that programming and the work I did in that area. I think one of the most important things to me today is the support system that I have been just blessed to have and to establish over all these years. And with my family, with so many friends here and around the country, my ties to the community, a lot of the community members and organizations that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of and to work with over all these years. So some of the work that I've done as far as educational opportunities, vocational opportunities, and just staying consistent, working, every day.
What program or thing that you were involved in do you think has been most influential to you?
Restorative justice by far. I have been up until I got here to Lionel, I was a 16, 17-year council member with restorative justice. I started it in 2006 when I was transferred to Stillwater, and it's probably the single most important program that I've been able to be a part of. It just taught me so much about victim perspective, community perspective, healing, restoration, what it looks like on both sides, how important it is. And I think it had a huge impact just on my ability to change from the person that I was to who I am today. I had actually kind of prepared a statement that I wanted to share with you all because I really felt like it speaks to that very thing. And if permitted, I would love the opportunity to share it, but...
Please do.
Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. And so I put this together because I really wanted to kind of give a sense of the essence of who I am because of the time I spent in restorative justice and some other programs. And so I wrote, when reflecting on the opportunity to speak to this panel, I wrestled with what to say. And I didn't want to make this about me, nor everything that I've accomplished. And because of those accomplishments, I should be afforded the opportunity to transition out of prison. The truth is, this day is about Marvin Nordine, the man whose life and light that I took out of the world. And to my genuine sadness, there isn't anything that I know about Mr. Nordine because I didn't know him. So how can I speak of him? Before I answer that, let me first say, there is a truth that I've walked toward ever since I decided to change my life. And that truth is I absolutely am a better human being for the people that I am connected to than forever choosing to walk the past 3 decades alone. And here's why. Marvin Nordine taught me the most profound lesson I have ever lived to learn, to understand the sanctity and worth of human life, no matter in which condition or form it comes. It is the greatest gift I believe you can give to humanity. And board members, I was not a good person, and that was made obvious by my life sentence crime. And before that day in July of '95, I had harmed people and made decisions that did not reflect the truth of my heart. And when I reflected on why, what resonated throughout my soul was one simple truth. For all the friends that I thought I had, honestly, I was more alone than I could have ever imagined. And in that disconnected state, I hurt people. What I did not recognize during that time of my life was simply the currency of life is right relationship. Later, I realized that the more I sought that, the less harm I caused. And the more I lived by it, the more healing in my life and in the lives of others I was able to partake. I can boldly say that today I sit before you as an amalgamation of dozens, if not hundreds of exceptional people of character. And all of them accepted me for the flawed man that I was the moment they met me. There is no question that I did the work to change, but I know God's word says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens the countenance of his friends. There are people who are connected to the DOC and others who are not, and they all have left an indelible mark upon my life that led to the transformation of the man I am today. My beautiful mother, Donita Spann, my brothers, Nairobi, Kenya, Coley Gates, Barry Dodd, Leon Perry, Jerome Nunn, Karen Boyer, Harry Boyer, Judy Hawkins, Jan Morhart, Kathy Beck, Steve Gherkin, Barb Carter, Charles Berry, John Foster, Patricia Pollock, Shalinda Wheeler, Prison Fellowship volunteers, Linda, Dave, Bob, Elroy, George, Ilza, Restorative Justice, Mary Johnson Roy, Jackie Millar, Alicia Nichols, Chris Furlong, Kay Pranis, Amicus, Russell Bellinger, and a multitude of others. These remarkable people cared about the whole story that was my life. The greatest influence upon my person and character is my son, Trey. My son inspired me in a sense of purpose and worth, unlike anything I could have foreseen. All I ever wanted was to pour something good in him that would be worthy of honoring Marvin Nordine and the lesson that he taught me. So today I want to say thank you to Marvin Nordine. I am not alone, and for 27 years, I have not been alone. And because of the currency I built, I'm now richer than ever. And I want to thank everyone who was present for their relationship. It is because of all of you, and then looking forward to this day, that my days have been anything but uninspiring or lifeless. And lastly, to the supervised board for hearing and considering me for work release. Please know I have a resilient desire to discover what more is good in me, that I can share it with the world out there, as I did with the world of incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you for that. When you touched on it in the letter, and we also read it in some of the information you provided. When you look back through the eyes of today on the date that you took Mr. Nordine's life, how do you describe that and everything that happened in between in a way that through the eyes of today as a 48 or 49-year-old man, and that particular day? And I hear what you're saying then in terms of the influence of friends and so forth. But was that it? Was it simply the influence of friends, do you think? No,
not at all. Not at all. It's, I think that was just one piece that was probably the straw that breaks the camel's back in my life. But before that moment, there were already things within me that were broken or that weren't completely healed. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to stand on my own. And so that kind of left me open for influences rather than being the type of person who can look someone in the face and say, no, this is what I stand for. This is what I believe. And so I believe some of those things that happened early in my life, because they were undealt with, kind of led to that moment where when it was crucial and it was necessary to be able to do the right thing, I was unable to. And I don't place that blame on anyone because I'm the one who walks in my shoes. No one else does. And so I think today when I look at who I was then and I reflect on where I am today, it's just vastly different. My heart and my mindset understand about the choices that we have to make every day. And as I spoke to in the letter, I think the one thing that resonates for me is understanding the sanctity of life, understanding how important life is and everyone being able to live their life, being in right relationship and understanding my part in community. And whether I know a person or I don't know a person, I am just as responsible for their life, as I would be for my own family, in the sense of, I have to respect their space and their environment and things. So, and that was something I didn't know how to do back then. I didn't know how to look at another life and say, I respect it no matter what. Whereas today, I respect life no matter what. I don't have a right to infringe upon anyone's life. Whatever my problems may be or may not be, everyone has a right to their life. And so that is the one thing that I know I was missing as a core part of who I was back then.
That's helpful. You've submitted, I think, a well-developed release plan, and if you were to anticipate, while you have relapse prevention built in and all those sorts of things, just based on the experience you've had, even with stepping down into minimum and being on a crew, can you describe the learning that came with that transition and what you anticipate the future transitions could look like if you were to be moved to work release and so forth?
Sure. Wow, I think so. Initially, I would say that my coming to a minimum facility and going out to work was an awesome experience. Something that obviously I've looked forward to for many years. And getting out there in the community was, for me, it was very, it was rewarding to know that this is what I have the chance to come back to and to be a part of, that sense of community. And I think one of the things I was fortunate in was the crew that I worked on. I worked in a place where, you know, we were treated like coworkers, you know, with regular employees at that place. And so it really helped me just grab that sense of community and how important it is to work together. And so that was a great lesson for me here, was to be able to grab a hold of that. But I think also it was that understanding of how important the step was, as far as the structure, there not being what's the word I'm thinking of, like more constraints, but, you know, less constraints and more freedom to kind of do things and walk the streets, or, you know, all those different things. And you're having access to more things. And that was important to go through that, because I know I'm very confident in who I am because of the work I've done, you know, but I also know that confidence doesn't just translate into perfection and doing everything right all the time. And so I think this step kind of helped me understand the importance of this structure and stepping down and taking your time and being able to move forward, you know, in gradual steps. Because I know once that door opens, you know, there's going to be things much more available to me than there are here now. And so being able to foresee those things and be ready to deal with those incoming things is important. So I think that was one of the steps, one of the things in this step that helped me to prepare for going forward.
That's helpful. Last question I have is, if Joe Spann was having things were not going well.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
If something was not going well for you in transition, what would it look like? What would people around you see? What would they notice?
I think for me, isolation, pulling away. A lot of the times, I know in my past I would get into my head, and I would just kind of pull away, and I would get silent, and not really sure on who to talk to or how to go forward, you know. And so that was, you know, and so a lot of the people who know me today, they kind of recognize that if Joe gets quiet, because they know I like to talk. So, and I'm very communicative today, much more than I used to be. And so for me to get quiet and to kind of pull away that's not normal for me. And people in my circle would definitely recognize that. So, and I'm fortunate because the people that are in my circle today, they have all the authority to say to me, hey, what's going on? What do we need to do? How do we move forward? And all those things, because I've given them that space in my life. So,
thank you for that. Do other board members have questions for Mr. Spann?
Mr. Spann, I have a question. And by the way, there are two screens here, so I'm looking at one screen. Others are looking at the other, I think. I'm curious as to what you think. In 2022, your psych eval labeled you as moderate risk to reoffend, and the current one in 2024 is low risk to reoffend. Why do you think that is? That change in 2 years?
I think initially my perspective of how confident I was to move forward, you know, because I remember the first time I came before you and you asked me what I wanted to see. I was like, I want to go home, you know, and I just felt so confident that I was ready for that moment. And I think now understanding that these steps are necessary, you know, it's not just about my own safety and my own ability to do things right, but also community things that are taking place. And so today I recognize how important those steps are, and doing things in an orderly fashion and not just saying, hey, you know, let him do what he wants because he says he can do it. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Spann, question for you. First, I'd like to just commend you. Like, as I read through your packet, you've done a lot of really good stuff. I'm so appreciative when, people take the opportunity and, own up to their mistakes and strive to make good use of the time that they have. One of the items that stood out to me in your comprehensive risk assessment was you talked about the importance of healthy relationships and kind of establishing boundaries, and that's an area that you identified in yourself as an area that you need to continue to work on. And then I draw some parallels between that statement and even your offense. You talk about during the offense, and this isn't to minimize the offense, but that you didn't want to let your co-defendant down, and that was a contributing factor, for lack of a more articulate way of putting it. So what have you done to kind of address that piece, that boundary, the relationship, maintaining healthy relationships? Like, what have you done to address that?
Excellent question. So I think that was one of the, that was a key point for me. That was a big deal for me because initially I didn't know how to address it. And when I got here and I started working with behavioral health and kind of sharing some of these things that were factors for me as far as relationships and boundaries, it was very helpful. And so one of those things was understanding like what my role in relationships are, whatever the relationship may be, understanding why I am in that relationship and what is my purpose there, understanding when to say no or to step away, not thinking more of myself than I should. And I know for me, it was a struggle a lot, feeling like I had to save people's feelings or save people's life experience so that they didn't experience anything bad. And so I used to take a lot of that on me and think it was my responsibility. And so today I am more, everybody has to be responsible for their own life, their own emotions and feelings and things. And so I have to be that way for my own. And so if that means I have to say no, or that means that I have to cut ties or whatever that may be for my own health, then that's what has to be done. And so that was a huge piece for me during my time here and working with behavioral health therapy. So,
do you have any fears or concerns as you are transitioning out?
I don't have any fears. I don't know what I could be concerned with just because I haven't been out there in so long. What I'm fortunate is that there have been so many men before me who I'm still connected to today, who I talk to on a daily or weekly basis, who kind of, give me the different ins and outs of what's going on, what's to be expected and things of that nature. And so I feel confident that I have people who can give me good insight, and I get to choose on, how I receive that insight and how I go forward with it. So I don't fear anything. And part of that is just because I've been so richly blessed with good people in my life, and no one's going to lead me astray or mislead me or anything like that. And so I know that I can count on that, but I also can count on 29 years of working on who I am, because I'm not the same man that I was when I was 19 years old or 18 years old when I committed this crime. And I'm a long way from that. I'm not perfect. Even as I've said in my letter, I know the potential for making mistakes is always there. And so I work every day to minimize those things, to lessen those mistakes in my life. So
thank you.
Any other questions?
I just like to ask you about your savings. It sounds like you've had an ongoing issue for the past few years with being able to build up an account. And I know some of the expenses were buying work boots and things like that. But where do you stand now in terms of your capacity to save, what you've saved, and what you anticipate needing for the next stage?
Yeah, so I've definitely put a little more away over the last couple months than I'd had previously. And there's some factors to it too, but also I could have just been better. I could have just definitely done better in my savings. And so at the moment, outside of my gate fee, I have almost $400 in savings. So, or I should say in my spending account. But I also have resources, family and friends who are more than willing to offer me any kind of financial need that I might need upon release. But I also know that I have a great job opportunity in front of me upon release. And so I'm not wanting for, employment. And so I know I have that opportunity to do that. And if granted work release during that time would be a great for me to be able to save before my actual parole eligibility date. So I can take that time there to definitely increase my savings.
In looking at your history with respect to money management, what do you think your biggest downfalls were in terms of being able to manage your money effectively, and how have you addressed those for the future?
Man, I think now it's more about understanding, what I need for myself moving forward, and making the necessary sacrifices, be it for things that I wanted or things like that, or helping others. More about what do I need to do for myself so that I can be in a better situation.
So are you saying that you were more generous with others and gave your money to others? And
yeah, so that was part of it. Helping, my son or my family or some friends, but also my own spending, like here, we're allowed to order out food, so order here monthly. And so I would order carbonis or things of that nature. And I could have just, sacrificed those things to increase my savings. And so that's kind of what I've been doing for the last few months here is, not going to canteen, not going to carbonis, just saving, and so, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else? Is Mr. Foster back on?
No, and Dan has emailed him and tried to get a hold of him as well.
Okay, we are not getting that connection with Mr. Foster. We couldn't. We lost him earlier, and sounds like there's been attempts to try and reach him. Well, at this time, I would just, Mr. Spann, I would just ask. Is there anything before we end this portion of the discussion that you would like, any final comments or statements you would like to make to the board before we begin deliberations?
I think at this point I would say, one, thank all of you for hearing me today, taking into account my whole history. One of the things I believe is I've definitely striven to be better, at every stage of my life over these, 29 years. I have been committed to growth. I've been committed to healthy living, right living, making amends and restoration. And so I would just ask that all of you take that into account, as you do your deliberation. But also know that I respect the process, and no matter what I've always thought about what I'm capable of, I definitely understand the importance of the process and going through it. So that's what I would share.
All right, thank you. I just want to ask one question. In your letter, you had said that you would request that the board not assign you to the bridge. Was one of the things that you had mentioned. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so it's not about not wanting to do the bridge. I think for me, it kind of goes back to Ms. Ramsted's question about my finances. And so I felt for some time, because of a couple job opportunities that I've had, that would greatly increase my ability to save. I've obviously done the anagram program within the facilities here, and so I kind of know what it is, the interstate aspect. And so it just, and I believe it's a 90-day bridge program, and so I just felt strongly that that would bring more hindrance to my savings than if I had an actual job to do that with. But as I said before, I'm always surrendered to the process, and if that's the process, I completely get it. But and I know in my packet there was a letter of intent to hire from 2 companies, and so it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I just wanted to ask that question. I do see we have we've got Mr. Foster back. So can you hear us okay now?
Oh, you may have to unmute.
Mr. Foster, can you hear us? We can't hear you yet. Is there certain buttons he needs to hit?
How about now?
Yes. Now we can hear you. We got you.
Okay, good.
All right. Well, good. Well, welcome. We had a lively conversation while you were trying to get connected. But we really appreciate you participating today. And just for folks who may be watching or listening, that folks who are going through this process have the right to have a person, a support person with them, and Mr. Foster is here to do that today. And we thank you for being here and participating, and for being a support to Mr. Spann. So thank you for that. I'd like to just open it up to you to talk a little bit about what you know of Mr. Spann and what you think about his readiness to move forward.
Well, first of all, I'd like to apologize to the committee or the board, if you will. Mike got caught away on an emergency. But there's a couple of things I would like to add, if you don't mind. First and foremost is that, Joseph, in my opinion, is as ready as he can be. And what I mean by that is he's done the hard work necessary to allow himself to be changed. I've been knowing Joseph for quite a number of years, and he's just been a tremendous asset to all the people around him. I am a chaplain, and I go into all the facilities, and we conduct Bible studies and one-on-one sessions with a lot of the men. And Joseph has shown tremendous leadership, just the way the men respond to him, just amazing to witness. And then secondly, we're the Salvation Army, and we are in the business of supporting people and different aspects. To help Joseph in any way necessary to allow his return, if you will, to be as smooth and seamless as possible. Housing, to operate a house, a pathway forward, re-entry house for the Salvation Army. It's a house for men, and I'm willing to guarantee that Joseph would have a bed, with room there. It's a 2-year program. We try to help in a support way, in any way we can. We provide clothing and job opportunities, bus passes, things of the sort. We also have a support group that we facilitate at one of our local corps. And we've all been discussing when Joseph comes home, he'll be a very instrumental part of that support group. So he's going to be surrounded by a lot of support.
Thank you very much for being here. How long have you known Joe?
About 5 years, I think it's been.
Right. Good. And what have you seen by way of changes in him or over that time?
Well, when I started going into the facilities, I myself didn't know the person that brought us to this moment, that put Joseph in the situation he's in, but I've witnessed this new person that he is, and I'm just he's so far removed from this person that brought him to this situation. It's just the transformation has been incredible.
Thank you.
I know he's.
Go ahead.
Say again. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Joseph, over the time that he's been incarcerated, he's worked on himself tremendously. I know you have all the certificates and all the accomplishments he's made, but I think the biggest accomplishment, Commissioner Snell, is that Joseph is a transformed human being, a person. He gave his life to Christ, and he's walked that out to the degree where he's helping other men come to Christ, if I may. And that's just he's just a powerful witness.
Thank you for that. And I just want to say thank you for your involvement and your work with the people in the Department of Corrections, and your Salvation Army certainly has done an incredible job of supporting people over the many, many years who are transitioning. We're really appreciative of all the work that you and Salvation Army has done for people who are system involved. So with that, we'll move into deliberation. And during this time, we will not entertain questions or other discussions with Mr. Spann, but we would open it up for board thoughts or comments.
I have a question. I think it might be for you, Becky. In his packet, he referenced a letter from One Way Wireless, and I couldn't find it. And I wondered if that was me, if you had it somewhere.
I know it was mentioned. I didn't see it.
Yeah, I didn't see it either. You read?
Okay.
Now that you bring it up.
Okay.
Is that letter the kind of offer of employment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Spann, you did get a letter from them. We just don't have it in the packet here, but yes. Oh, you got it. He's got it there. I think he's got it. You can just tell us if you. But
yeah.
you
I definitely have one. Yeah.
Okay.
And I can always make that to my case manager the information for my contact there, and so.
Yeah. Okay. No problem at all. And that's that cabling work, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Did you do the cabling program?
I did at Moose Lake. I completed it.
Yeah. So okay.
In terms of conversation or deliberation, just really impressive. I think there's a level of depth and real sincerity I felt in his responses, but then also the packet really speaks to that. I'm very confident in him transitioning to that next step. Yeah, like I said, very, very impressive.
I agree, and I'm wondering, with the motion, is it appropriate to continue him for 1 year when he's right up against his date?
I mean, that
with work release.
Yeah.
And all that business.
I mean, he could be transitioned to work release and bringing him back a year from now, which would then be at that point in time, it just would be a check-in more or less, right? Assuming everything goes like we would anticipate or expect in work release, that he could be moved. The board also could do, if that they're more comfortable with that, the other option would be to presumptively do that and conditioned upon successful, involvement in work release and the submission of a satisfactory release plan. But it certainly would be up to the board if you want to see him before giving him a date.
So that's kind of my preference, just as a general. That's just kind of my preference. So I mean, if we're kind of looking for a motion, I would make a motion to deny parole, but to approve the work release and the kind of that transitional, and set a review date for a year.
Yeah. So when he would become eligible, fully eligible for parole.
Yes.
So is that was a motion?
That was a motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I think in terms of additional items to add, and I think Cheryl kind of mentioned it, certainly the financial piece, which was referenced within his packet, continue to strive to kind of address that. Obviously, things are expensive. Having some savings and money available is important and can kind of help you as you transition. So really encourage that. I would also continue ongoing work with behavioral health, just because I think he had even indicated in a packet that there's a desire to continue that upon transition into the community. So, I mean, those would be things I would like to see.
The only thing I would say is I would have gone with the presumptive, but given that we can get consensus, I go along with the motion when the time comes.
Yeah.
To vote.
So I think, just so for the record, Mr. Spann has submitted also like a plan, some of his high priority goals for work release, should the board grant that. And that included building finances, banking, credit, savings. And I just, being that, I guess when you're my age, being 48 is still a relatively young person. And so it's got some time that this becomes an important part of life. And so I think having that competency becomes really important. And I would also say that for some of the board members who don't know, many of the people that were listed, some of them have been people who came before us in the short time that the board has been functioning, and many of them are active and are successful in the community and participate in these lifer groups, and there's quite a community there. So, which he has also indicated as one of his transition goals. Any other thoughts or suggestions? Otherwise, we'll move to a vote.
Could I just ask about bridge and?
Yeah, I would say that I would include everything in his plan, which really included the lifer group, and I would support, assuming that he has a job offer that's viable. I would support him going to, not having to do a bridge and transition, and just provide some opportunity for some opportunities, as he pointed out, to earn more if he's got job offers in the making. All right, there's a motion and a second, and this would be to deny parole with a plan of moving him forward to work release, bringing him back in January of next year to consider review kind of his progress, and at that time he would be fully eligible for parole consideration. In addition to successful work release, which means compliance with all the rules and remain discipline free. On that is the money management, the behavioral health, in the community, which is going to demand some work to set that up and to figure that out, and make sure you get insurance and so forth to help you with the cost of that. And there may be some other resources around that, and that we can help with. And then, all of the items that you mentioned in your plan would certainly be things that we would expect you to follow through on, as you identified them as high priority goals going forward. So with that, a motion and a second is there. To the motion, Board Member Bray.
Yes.
Board Member Larson.
Yes.
Board Member Ramstad.
Yes.
And Schnell votes yes. And just for the record, Board Member Earhart is abstaining today. So we have the motion passes unanimously. So Mr. Spann, so you heard the discussion. You're moving forward, and I think it is a testament, as Member Larson kind of pointed out, to the really incredible work that you've done, and I think your recognition of the fact that what you owe Mr. Nordin and the Nordin family is to live your best life, and part of that is in service to others, and we would certainly expect that as you go forward, as you've demonstrated on the inside, we would expect to see that on the outside. So we want to just congratulate you. This is the positive goal that you had out of this meeting to move forward. And I think you can hear loud and clear on the board that there is support for that. And we look forward to talking to you next January, hearing about this experience and what that plan is for parole.
Yes,
Any questions? Any questions about that?
No, sir, none at all.
All right. So staff will begin the process of facilitating the move to work release. Congratulations, and thank you for your participation today. And we also appreciate you, Mr. Foster, being here today and being a part of this process.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you,
Board.
Take care. All right.
All right, our next review, we'll try to double back to Stillwater and hopefully we can.
They're ready and he is in the room.
Okay.
Thank you. So this is a Bergeron review.
Yeah. That's clear, isn't it?
As a reminder, you are speaking to the IP or the room folks. It's this white camera on the wall if you want to make eye contact with them. I know it can be a little bit confusing because we can see it there, but your best eye contact is this camera.
Sounds good.
That's good to know.
Thank you.
I know it's a new setup for us.
Yeah. All right. We have the facility. We're connected. So I'll turn it over to you, Becky.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rebecca Holmes Larson, Executive Officer of Hearings and Release and the Supervised Release Board. We're here today to review Joseph Bergeron, who's present by video at the Minnesota Department of Corrections facility in Stillwater. Here with me at the Minnesota Department of Corrections Central Office is our commissioner seated to my left. He is chair of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell. Also present are members Christine Bray, Cheryl Ramstad, Andrew Larson, and we have juvenile expert Donald Strufert here today. And we also have our newest board member, Joe Earhart, observing today on screen. Our records indicate that on September 15th, 1988, Mr. Bergeron and two juvenile accomplices entered into the Minneapolis, Minnesota residence of Thomas Berger with the intent to commit burglary. Mr. Berger was involved in a relationship with Mr. Bergeron's sister. During the burglary, Bergeron stabbed Mr. Berger 4 times in the back, 2 times in the chest, and 2 times in the abdomen, causing his death. Prior to his death, Mr. Berger was able to identify Mr. Bergeron as the one who stabbed him. On April 11th of 1989, Joseph John Bergeron was sentenced to life imprisonment by Hennepin County District Court after having been found guilty of first-degree murder. Mr. Bergeron was originally reviewed by the Commissioner of Corrections and his advisory panel on September 11th of 2002. This was his 14-year initial review. He was continued for a future review in 3 years. He was transitioned through minimum custody and work release and eventually paroled on February 10th of 2011. He was restructured 2 times while in the community. Then, on October 23rd, 2014, he was found in violation of his conditions of release for new criminal behavior, specifically use of intoxicants, driving under the influence, interfering with police, and fleeing. He was returned to the custody of the Department of Corrections to address chemical dependency treatment programming. Mr. Bergeron was offered the opportunity to participate in additional reviews by the Commissioner and Advisory Panel, both on January 16th of 2018 and January 15th of 2020. He chose not to participate in those reviews. Today's review with the Supervised Release Board is his 10th review after approximately 33 years. Mr. Bergeron, thank you for participating today. I have one question for you. On your certification of rights form, you did not mark whether or not you were ready to proceed. Are you ready to proceed for your review today?
Yes, ma'am. I just must have missed it. I just must have missed it.
Well, just wanted to make sure you were ready. Thank you for attending. I'll turn this over to the board. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. I appreciate having you here today. Can you start out by just talking about and providing some context around deciding to come today, and why that is, and what's different?
All right. Well, at the risk of brevity, some of which you know, I was returned to prison by Commissioner Tom Roy, and at that time, I was told by my agent and my lawyer that there was certain rules and such that they had to follow in terms of my re-imprisonment. Tom Roy didn't follow any of them rules, so initially, with the help of my attorney, we filed several legal actions with varying degrees of responses and successes. So I was told initially by my lawyer that the legality of a contract doesn't matter if you agree to it. If you agree to an illegal contract and sign it, you are still bound by that contract. So initially, it was his advice that I just pursue the legal avenue and not participate in, at the time, we believed was an illegal contract, the parole board, because I had been paroled. So as such, revocation law reigns supreme, and the parole board does not. As you are aware, there's been a number of legal actions that your attorney has taken part of. I don't know how. I guess I should. Maybe I'm speaking. Maybe you're not as aware because it's not part of your deal. You have the legal firm do it, but you at least somewhat that there's been legal actions. Those are done for the most part. And my lawyer, to be perfectly frank, part of my agreement with my lawyer was that he would pursue and help me if I was willing to take legal action against the Bloomington Police Department. And I declined to do that, so I lost him. So a lot of it's been on my own up till now. At this point, I'm here because I think I should be, I guess. I mean, I don't have a better answer, Okay. if I can expand or say more, please let me know.
Go ahead. If there's something else you'd like to let us know, please do.
I mean, in terms of why I'm here, I think I'm just here because I think I should be. I think it's the right thing to do at this juncture. I mean, in terms of that reason, that's it. I mean, if there's something else you want to know in relation to it, I'd be willing to share that.
But I think here, I guess one of the things that it's a little confusing for me, just to be frank, is that when you were brought back, it appeared as though that the goal or expectation was that you would address or participate in some level of chemical dependency intervention program treatment, whatever that was, and that was a path, and the other path was the due process path, and I don't ever fault anybody for exercising their due process rights, but I guess one of the things I'm wondering about is your thinking around the difference between wouldn't at some level it have been easier to just like follow through on the substance use disorder treatments path and avoid some of the, potentially years of incarceration? And I guess that's the question.
Okay. So when I was on the street, and I think this is all relevant to my thinking, whether you understand it or not, I started, I don't have family, I don't have money, I don't have anything. I grew up in the hood. When I got on the street, I had $2,000 in my pocket, and that was it. So all I could do was go to work, and that's what I did. And I worked, 18 and 20 hours a day, 7 days a week at times for years. And as a result, I moved around a little bit, but before my incarceration, I owned a house. I had a very good job. I was a supervisor for Jacobs Electrical Commercial. I was I had my truck, my car. I had built a life. I housed my handicapped mother. I housed my sister-in-law and my 9-year-old niece, my wife. And I took care of all that. All that financial burden was mine, and I'm not complaining. I was proud that I was able to do that. And I was proud that I was able to provide that for them. And things were good. Because of my mistake, because I went out and had a drink with fellow workers to celebrate, again, a bad decision, but to celebrate my position as a supervisor for Jacobs. I got the DUI. So I immediately reported that DUI to my agent, and my agent had me come in, and I did everything I was supposed to do, and I asked her, well, we talk, whatever. She told me, listen, I don't like this. She says, but when something like this happens, you've done everything that we want people to do. So she says, you go home, go back to work, and let me know when there's a final adjudication of this. And I says, okay. It was a little while later, Tom Roy issued the warrant, and I was re-imprisoned. I was panicky because of the responsibility I had, not only for my family, but for my job and everything else. And my lawyer at the time told me that they could keep me up till 90 days. And that made me sick to my stomach because I didn't know how I was going to be able to pay my bills. I didn't know how I was going to be able to take care of my family. I didn't know how I was going to continue to do all these things. I didn't know what I was going to say to my employer. Well, come to find out, he could hold me a lot more than 90 days. And he, at the time, gave me a year set off. Well, in that year's amount of time, when I was working with my lawyer, he told me the legalities and the due process, as you pointed out, and we'll get this worked out. But over time, as my family became homeless, as my house was taken away, as my cars were, my automobiles were taken back, bank took them, as everything went away, as everything fell apart. And there was nothing that I could do to help any of them. And my sister-in-law became worse. She was victimized by some gang activity because she was trying to find a place for her and her niece. And she inadvertently wound up in jail as a result, in prison, actually. So I was dealing with a lot that was overwhelming to me. And all I could see was, how can I help? I need to help. I need to get... And I was angry. I was upset. And I'm very angry, very upset for a long time. And I was certain that the due process issue would pan out, especially with the Bergeron 590 decision that said the commissioner was bound by revocational law. And I was frightful that I could be released and having tried to put a life back together and wind up back in prison because I jaywalked and I know that's a little excessive, but just my point being, to be, and again, I'm not diminishing the fact that I drank. I'm just saying that it was a huge penalty and a lot of people suffered as a result. And it was my opinion, I don't have AOD issues. I never drank or used anything in prison before or after. I went through treatment while I was here before, and when I went to treatment, they wanted to kick me out because they said my AOD was negative. It was Benson that made a phone call that said he wanted me to stay in there anyway. So I went through there and I completed it. The AOD for me is not an issue. I made a mistake. I'll never do it again. I don't struggle with it. I'm not have any desire to use anything. I just don't do it. And like my lawyer said, if it was an authentic thing, if it was something that somebody really believed that I needed, that could have been accomplished while I was on the street. It would have been paid for by my insurance plan rather than the taxpayer. And we at the time just thought it was a reason to keep me incarcerated. So that's the most honest I can be with you about it.
That's fair. Was there a point at which you gave up? I asked this question because I think, there certainly, there was a change in commissioner. There were some of those things that may have looked different. I don't know, but I guess I'm asking the question: did you, beyond the legal side, was there a point that you just gave up and said, "I'm just stuck anyway, so I'm not going to do it," or was it really more out of anger and frustration with process?
With this process here?
Well, with the fact that you're reincarcerated.
Yeah, I mean both. But the legal process only recently came to a relative conclusion. And again, and I'm not asking, but I don't know how aware you are with that. But so when the appellate court made a decision in the Bergeron 590 case saying that the commissioner was bound by revocation rules and laws and so on and so forth, but they chose not to provide a judgment because they relied on an earlier decision, the Baylor decision, which says habeas relief can only be achieved through constitutional imperfections. The newer decision is Pollard, which says it can provide statutory relief, which is what they should have done. But because of that imperfection, I have been litigating that aspect of it thereafter continually by one means or another, including the federal court. So I think the last decision I got was a denial from the United States Supreme Court for certiorari. But the last hearing that you had provided or you had set up, I was still involved in litigation. So it wasn't so much giving up. I was just going down that route, and I was believing the tutelage and the education I was given by people that were smarter than me legally, and so on and so forth.
So let me I think take a step forward. What would you like to see happen?
Well, Commissioner, I don't know. I mean, because the thing is it's your decision, right? So, what I can tell you, if it's a decision, of public safety, I'm not a threat to anybody. I work for a living. Even here, and he'll testify, I've had gang members come up to my cell and try to attack me in my cell. There was a fight there that I refused to get involved in because I am against gang, against crime, against drugs. There was a guy that snuck up behind me on the flag and hit me, and I got 8 stitches in the back of my head. They put the guy that killed my cousin, Officer Joe Bergeron, 2 cells down from me on 8, and he lived there for a year. All these things were very, very aggravating and overwhelming to me, but I'm not willing to, even though that I didn't think I was ever getting out, I'm not willing to do bad behavior or do things wrong. So if it's an issue of public safety, there is no issue. I'm not a threat to public safety. I work for a living. I have 3 master's degrees in HVACR. I am a journeyman electrician. I definitely have an opportunity at almost 60 to still have a very good employment and still be able to work 10 years that was required for the minimal level of Social Security, and ideally work someplace where there is some kind of retirement package, so I am not a burden on the taxpayer, so I am not a burden on the state. So if you want to keep me in prison for whatever reason, there's nothing I can argue with you about that. That's your choice, and you being a person that has been in law enforcement for many years and is very intelligent in terms of these things. So I'm not going to sway you one way or another. You are far more intelligent than I am. But if it's based on threats, there is no threat. As far as that drinking incident, way bad. It'll never happen again, in or out of prison. As far as a threat to anybody, I am not.
So let me just ask this question. Have you, you may not have you looked at recently at your life or book packet? Have you participated or looked at any of that stuff?
A little bit with Mr. Lynch.
Okay. Did you look at the comprehensive risk assessment, which is the psychological, which was done without your participation? Did you look at that at all?
Are you referring to something specific? I don't know.
So, but the specific thing I'm looking at is the assessment, and the psychologist who did it, indicates and says it is thought that he would present a moderate to high risk of future violence. Now, that certainly is not informed by the opportunity to speak with you, right? Because it was informed more by record reviews and some of those sorts of things. So what's your reaction to that, number one? And number two, do you wish that you had participated in the assessment so that potentially, what you're telling the board would be perhaps reflected in this assessment?
I don't know. At the time, it was suggested to me that my participation wouldn't really affect it one way or another because they're going to come to their own conclusion based on their own information. And I kind of believed that. But as far as that risk assessment, I think it's an error for sure. If you look at the totality of my life, both in and out of prison, I don't know how anybody could come to that conclusion. I've been like I said, at this incarceration, 10 years, I've been in ample situations where if I was a lot of people would think they have a right to react violently. I chose not to. I chose not to on the street. I am a building maintenance worker. I've been there for 10 years. I go to every block, every place in the institution. I deal with tons of different behaviors, different personalities, outbursts. I have more potential problems on any given day than most inmates, and I make the right decisions. I do well, and I am not violent. My initial crime was a violent crime. There was no violence before. There was no violence afterwards. So I would have to challenge where she comes up with that determination.
And so, you talk about the fact that there was no violence, other than your life sentence crime, no violence before, no violence after, right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And so here, this becomes the challenge because, that fact, what you just said is a fact that, I just have to take it at face value that is the case, that there wasn't violence before, there wasn't violence after, which we would have an established record of. That said, this was a life sentence crime, and there wasn't a record prior to that would indicate that you would be involved in that kind of conduct. So that's number one. And then number two, you certainly, just given the term of your involvement in the system, have, thought about kind of this whole notion of criminal thinking. And again, I don't want to tie criminal thinking to an exercise of due process, but I also think about sometimes there is a practical reality. Well, let me just look at this, ask this practical question. If the board were to say to you today, Mr. Bergeron, we hear you, we'd like to, but you know what? In order to do anything, for us to feel a level of comfort, we want you to complete a substance use disorder treatment program, or be, at a minimum, be reassessed and follow that recommendation. What would your response to that be?
I'm willing to be reassessed, and I'm not unwilling to do treatment. Here's my issue, Mr. Commissioner, is like the last time. Granted, this time I do have a DUI and the admitted usage, but like the last time, when the assessment found that I needed treatment, so I agreed to go to treatment. It was Atlantis at the time. Then they did, when they talked to people or whatever, they went around and talked to people in the institution, they talked to my family, and realized that I had a negative ALD, and they wanted to remove me from treatment because I have no history. Again, at that time, Dennis Benson stepped in and had them keep me there. And I went through it, although modified a little bit. So am I willing to go? Yeah. Are they willing to keep me? Who knows? Because I have no history. The only struggle and I have no struggle. There's never been a single struggle. There has been a problem with me making a bad decision and picking up that DUI afterwards, which is even a worse decision. But if you're asking, will I be assessed? Would I go based on a potential release? Yes, I would.
Okay. There, at least in the record, there was some indication that while you were on release status, there was a couple of restructures. Can you just explain those? What happened in those?
Yeah, and so the one, the first one was when I moved to a different location. That's the first one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Where was the tardy one? I'm sorry, I'm getting confused in the timeline here.
It doesn't matter. Just like we're just looking at.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah,
what happened?
The tardy, the first one was when I was late or supposedly late when my ISR agent showed up. So she showed up to my house when I was in my garage putting together cabinets. And my wife's daughter's boyfriend answered the door, said I wasn't there. A few minutes later, I was told that they had showed up. So I called her back incessantly for a period of time and saying, listen, I'm here. I was just in the garage. I'm here, please. And she didn't pick up. So the task force showed up. They did what they do. You know, they made me blow on the thing and checked the house, looked around, and they arrested me. So I was released a couple of days later on that. But to ISR's credit, after that, they would come to my garage first. Because at the time I was remodeling houses, that was my employment, and a lot of stuff was preparation in my garage. So they would come there first. So that problem would never happen again. So I was grateful to them for that. The second one was an issue I had with sister-in-law's friends who needed a place to stay. I let them stay in the basement for a while, and there was problems with the house. So they had, and I don't think you know all this, but just to be perfectly honest with you, there was a point where they had marijuana in the basement, and my wife told me they had marijuana in the basement, so I called and told them they had to leave the house. You had to be gone. Get out of the house. But I can't have any of that, blah, blah, blah. So they left, and then they called my agent and said that I was doing any number of horrible things. So I immediately went to the fourth precinct to show that I was close to my house, and I called my agent from there. I said, I'm at the fourth precinct. It's all bullshit. And then she required me to then come in and pee in a cup and all these other things, blah, 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 yakety smackety. There were some other problems that he continued to make, and there was problems with the house. So I got with my agent. I said, I'm going to move to Coon Rapids in my niece's basement for a while. It was well documented. It was well laid out, and she went out of her way to document it and lay it out. So I said, all right, thank you, appreciate it. So I got a new agent, Bill Linden, and he apparently went to the old house in South Minneapolis looking for me. When I was at work, I got a call from a friend of mine saying, Joe, what did you do? I said, what do you mean, what did I do? He said, the feds are looking for you. I said, the feds? They says, yeah, they gave me a number. So I called this Fed, supposedly Fed number. Nobody answered. I called Bill Linden. I said, listen, supposedly the feds are looking at what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And Bill Linden says, well, did you do anything wrong? I said, no. He says, where are you at? I says, I'm working. He says, well, if you didn't do anything wrong, you got nothing to worry about. I says, okay. So, and I get another call from somebody else talking about these feds. Look, I called Bill Linden back a second time. I said, Bill, these people are still, tell me what you want me to do. I said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Tell me. He says, if you haven't done anything wrong, you're fine. So I'm working, so it's just an interruption in my workday. I call my wife. I said, this is the number they gave me. Please call these people and find out what's going on. And she says, okay, I will. And we're doing my thing. So she finally calls me back. She says, Joe, it's not the feds. It's the task force. Your agent put out a freaking warrant for your arrest. I called Bill Linden back. I said, Bill, you put the warrant out for my arrest. He says, oh, yeah, I did. You're not living where you're supposed to be. I said, what are you talking about? Yes, I am. He says, no, you're not. I said, what do you want me to do, Bill?
Let me just get to the end of the story here, because it ended in a restructure, right? In the end?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I get that, something happened that didn't go well. So I got the point.
I don't mean to belabor the point. I'm just trying to share with as much information with you as I can about it so you have it.
Okay. All right. Do others have questions for Mr. Bergeron?
Well, I do, Mr. Bergeron. Kind of going back to the fact that you violated your parole and you ended up back in prison. And were you sober completely prior to the time you had drinks with your colleagues?
Yes.
And how many drinks did you have? Because ending up with a DUI is, sort of a big deal.
It's a huge deal. And it's because of the drink. It's my bad decision. So to be, again, 100% honest with you, I was just celebrating the fact that I'm now the supervisor for Jacobs Electric.
Right. How many
and
drinks
when I was there, I had a few. But my point being is I had a few, and I started feeling dizzy or odd in my head. And rather than make the smart decision to call a cab or do something else, I said, I'm feeling odd, I got to leave. And I jumped in my car and left, which was the worst decision. So that's how that happened. But I panicked. And when I panicked, I made the worst decision.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, what it raises for me is if you go out on parole again, or when you go out on parole again, is something like that going to happen again? Just another stupid mistake and I'm not asking the question. I'm just telling you that's what it leaves me thinking. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, the assessment that was done most recently, you didn't participate in, and part of that you said was the rationale for getting moderate risk to reoffend, but you did participate in 2017. This is after you were sent back, and in 2015, and you got the same risk level. Are you saying that's because you were told to go to CD treatment and the first time you did, but they had you leave, and then you didn't go in 17?
You mean the psychological review are you talking about?
Yeah, you were at those two. You participated.
No, I did not. I did not. She called me up and she asked me to sign a Tiananmen agreement or something. I forget what the name of it was. But she wanted me to sign this Tiananmen agreement, this, that, and the other, if I wanted to be involved. And I said no. I said, tell the committee, because one of Commissioner Roy's thing was you didn't say on the advice of counsel. So I told her at the time, and I remember it distinctly, I says, on the advice of counsel, I choose not to participate. So that's...
So is that for 2017 and 2015? I understand you didn't participate in the last...
Yeah, I haven't participated in any of it since my return to prison. So that's an error by somebody, but I haven't and a lot of it, again, was in relation, at that time, was in relation to my legal pursuits, and which is why I used his terms that he wanted me to use. On the advice of counsel, I choose not to participate.
Thank you. I thank you for clarifying. I thought you had participated in those.
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I guess I do have one, and it's just to make sure that I'm understanding it correct. So I think Commissioner asked if going forward, if is there a willingness on your part to comply with the directives that were originally given in 2014, I think is when you came back, the treatment, that there is willingness on your part?
If you want me to take an evaluation and then follow through with that evaluation, I would do that. But I guess I'm not worried enough. It doesn't matter because I might die in prison anyway. But the fact that I could get into treatment, they can once again say, well, you have no history other than this DUI, therefore you didn't be here. Then the commissioner says, well, that's a program failure. You screwed up. Is where I worry, I guess, or I have apprehension. But your question is, would I follow through with it? Yes.
Can I just ask one other question, and then we'll bring this to an end? I guess I want to just. I know that we're having some of the conversations here are really focused on your return, re-incarceration, and the revocation side, and then really what the next steps are and how to address or respond to that. But I want to go back. I want to go back to the fundamental reason that you were in prison, and that was taking the life of a young man. What obligation do you feel you continue to have because of your taking of another person's life?
Well, I mean, education, of course, and it's what I continue to do. It's what what I did on the street. It's what I do here. And it has nothing to do with, it's personal. It's like I tell people, it's not where you live, it's how you live. So, and that's fundamental to us as humans. And if we're ever going to evolve as a species, we must recognize we're all humans, and there's never a reason to get so overwhelmed or get so angry or get so that you result in hurting somebody else. There's always a better decision. There's always another decision. There's always a moment to take a breath. There's always a moment to step back. There's always a moment to reconsider. There's multiple decisions that you can make rather than responding impulsively. And I involve myself in that very, very assertively all the time, especially in this environment, because it is so hostile and people tend to want to react in a hostile manner, and that can always potentially result in the most dire of circumstances.
That's helpful. And so you, and this is different than how you were prior to your life sentence offense? Or, so what's the difference, right? Because you said you lived kind of that way prior to your offense, and then after, but there was it an isolated incident, a bad judgment, or what was this?
Well, what I said, I wasn't violent, I wasn't hostile, I wasn't aggressive. Again, I'm not complaining, I'm just for issues of clarity for you. I grew up in the street, I grew up in the hood, and my mother was a horrible alcoholic. So it was me and my sister, and my main obligation in life, and I felt like it was taking care of my sister and looking out for her. And that's what I did most of my young life. I wasn't educated. When I came to prison, my education level was 6th or 8th grade. I was a dumb, stupid kid who loved his sister. Tom, God rest his soul, was a major drug dealer in North Minneapolis, and he's beating my sister and putting her in her hospital over and over again. And my mother made it very clear to me that something had to be done to stop this. I was young. I was 21. I was scared to death. I was scared of him. He was 33. Yeah, he was a Hell's Angel, and it was all fear. And that's what I tell people here too. Fear can get people to do the worst things. Fear is the absolute worst thing to have. And I went over there and not intending to take his life, intending to somehow be aggressive, somehow be assertive with my cousin and his friend, and to somehow diminish what was going on. And that didn't work at all. So was it an isolated incident? Yeah, but it was a horrible isolated incident. It was, and I live with that to this day. It bothers me. I'm almost 60 years old, and I still have nightmares from time to time about it. But yes, it was an isolated incident.
Okay, thank you.
I would
Yeah.
just have one more question. And I ask this question largely because your situation is a little bit different than some of the others that we've seen, because you have been paroled and are now back. So that's why I'm going to phrase this question the way I am. Do you feel as though someone who is released under supervised release on a charge such as yours, the murder charge, do you feel as though they should be held to a higher standard than perhaps someone who is under, supervised release for some other offense? And I asked the question largely because you're there 11 years after being returned. And so I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts on that. Like there's an element that it feels like a little bit of self-destructiveness almost. And I don't know a better way to describe it, and perhaps I'm wrong, but does that question make sense to you?
A little bit. So, I mean, to a higher standard, yeah, I mean, to agree, I agree with you. I think, yes, they should be held to a higher standard. The conviction itself, without diminishing crime, the conviction itself can sometimes not be 100% right in terms of the first-degree murder, second-degree murder, because we know there's people with second-degree murder with horrible, horrible crimes that because they're on that second-degree murder standard don't fall under this standard. But all that being said, I think that you guys, as you change from time to time, do hold them to a higher standard instantly to transition towards release in the first place. Because we have people that horrify me, people that are convicted of murders that horrify me, that live horribly their whole sentence, and then are unleashed onto the community, which makes me sick to my stomach. So, but that happens every day. But again, the answer to your question is, yes, they should be held to a higher standard just based on the conviction, because you guys are not here to determine the legality of the conviction. You're here to determine safety for the community and somebody that's not going to ideally make you look bad for the decisions that you've made. So I do think that based on that, yeah, there should be a higher standard. And I understand why you look more intimately into people that come before you. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it does.
No, fair enough. Appreciate it.
I have one more for you.
Sure.
I just want you to think back to 2022, because I'm looking at like a 19 or 20 page assessment by the psychologist where you're quoted several times. And you said, no, I never met with one.
As God is my witness, ma'am, as God is my witness, I never have met with them or talked with them at all.
That's good enough. That's good enough. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bergeron, I want to just provide you with any last opportunity to provide or make any closing comments to the board prior to us talking about next steps.
I don't know. I think that I've done all I can. I think you guys are, you're sharper than I am. You're making a hard decision. And I don't think that I can influence a lot. All I can share with you, and I think that the record and the history proves it out, is I am no threat to the community in or out of prison. And two, I have a skill set that allows me to be employed in ways that even at 60 provide opportunity for me not only to do very well for myself but for others. I will be successful wherever I'm at. If you leave me here, I will continue to be successful here. If I haven't been released, I will be successful there. The incident that got me in prison will never happen again, ever.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to close the discussion. During discussion deliberation, the board will not entertain questions or allow interruptions. And with that, I would just open it to the board for any discussions, thoughts, observations.
Well, he was right. I was looking at a different report. So I have 2015 and I have 2017 from him, and he claims he wasn't present, and I don't know any difference.
I think it may have been reports very similar to the one we have here, where it was, the reports were done in absentia.
Right, that's why I went back and requested the other.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So just want everyone to know that.
So I agree with some of what he says, and I hope he hears it. I think he does have a skill set. However, I mean, the fact remains there's an unmet directive, and it does feel somewhat self-defeating, and I hope that he does take the opportunity to do what he says. I mean, I would not be in favor of releasing him to supervised release until the directives that have been issued previously are met. I mean, that's just where I'm at.
I'm there as well. I mean, whether it's an assessment or whatever. I mean, I can't say what would have happened or anything, and I don't, as I said earlier, don't have an issue with somebody like exercising their rights, but at some point in time, addressing the issue that existed based off of bona fide conduct, the DWI and the resulting decisions that came from there, which I think included maybe some fleeing or something like that. That was a part of that. I think from a public safety standpoint, whether he would agree or not is immaterial. But I think I'm guessing that that's what really informed the decision, and then the kind of like I'm going to. And again, I don't want to minimize the fact that he had legal counsel where they provided advice, and that's that. But it also speaks to this whole notion of like, prove it, make me, some of that kind of stuff, which tends to be a little bit more in the criminal thinking port, and that concerns me. I am glad to hear that he would be willing to follow through. But we have a man here who spent 10 years in prison that potentially wouldn't have needed to. I hear what he's saying, that he has an opportunity to walk out and become an electrician, do whatever that he can make a good living, and that's fortunate for him. But I think, to your point, making sure that this issue is not an issue is certainly would be on my list, number one. And number two, I do think that he had a lengthy period, term of incarceration. He was out in the community for a good chunk of time, but he has been locked up for almost twice as long as he was out. And I am admittedly concerned about just the process of stepping down. I think it's one step at a time. I wouldn't mind seeing him have an assessment or even moving to a medium site where treatment could be provided, and having that assessment and being in a spot. But I would rather have him move, because I'm really not comfortable with releasing him from close custody after 10 years. That's just me.
Well, my thought wasn't even stepping to minimum. It really was.
I meant medium,
Or medium, right. I think you said that. My thought was more 2 isolated incidents that resulted first in a murder, and now, he's back in prison. I'd really worry about the next isolated incident should he get out. So I would really favor CD treatment, and if they say, oh, it's not appropriate, then I think mental health is pretty crucial here. And a release plan.
At a minimum, yeah.
So are we needing a motion? Because I would make a motion to deny granting of supervised release at this time, in terms of, when we would come back to re-review, certainly open for discussion. I know that there's, wait lists and that sort of stuff. And I don't know, maybe Commissioner, you would have a better sense on what is a realistic, time frame to come back. I mean, are we talking a year, 18 months, 2 years?
But if we were to look at, the treatment, and depending upon what treatment program he went into, would be assessed into, and then, just this whole, for me, it would be that, and I would like to see him actually participate in the risk assessment process, so that that right now we have a moderate to high risk, and based upon file reviews and those sorts of things, I would really be interested in knowing what an actual assessment would look like if he participated in it. And so that would be an additional item that I'd like to see happen. And, I think would be, and then I think obviously if his objective is to be out, then or begin to really work on a comprehensive release plan, and then come back in 18 months and see where we are.
That makes sense to me.
So you want to move that?
Yes, consider that moved.
Okay, that's a motion. And we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, let's vote on a motion before us. To the motion, Board Member Bray.
Yes.
Board Member Earhart abstains. Board Member Larson.
Yes.
Board Member Ramstead.
Yes.
And Schnell votes yes. The motion prevails. Mr. Bergeron, we're going to parole denied. Obviously, a re-release is denied. We would be looking at you to participate in substance use treatment, as may be indicated by treatment staff there. Number one. Number two, participate in complete comprehensive assessment, and develop a comprehensive release plan to present back to us in 18 months. Any questions about that?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back in and move on with Mr. Brom. He was leaving that for me.
It's going to leap under there and grab that.
Will this take me? Will this take you? I'm accused of, at least I could be vulnerable to trying
to sway him.
With the dollar.
Just wanted to ask.
Yeah, I appreciate the way the morning.
Thank you. All right, everyone, we are connected for our next review on Mr. Brom. Just wait for everybody to show up here on the screen. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Rebecca Holmes Larson, Executive Officer of Hearings and Release in the Supervised Release Board. We're here today to review Mr. David Brom, who is present by video at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Lino Lakes. Mr. Brom also has his advocate and friend, Mr. Paul Welker, present on the screen as well. Here with me at the Minnesota Department of Corrections Central Office is our Commissioner and Chair of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell, along with board members Christine Bray, Cheryl Ramstead, Jody Nelson, Juvenile Expert Member Jody Nelson, Juvenile Expert Member Donald Strufert, Andrew Larson, and we also have our newest board member present by video observing today. Our records indicate that on February 18th, 1988, a deputy of the Olmsted County Sheriff's Department entered the Brom residence. The officer found 4 deceased victims, Bernard, Paulette, Diane, and Richard Brom. The victims had been killed by repeated blows with a heavy, sharp object. A blood-stained axe was found in the home. On February 17th, 1988, Mr. Brom indicated to a friend that he was going to kill his family. On February 18th, 1988, Mr. Brom telephoned another friend and stated that he had killed his family. On October 15th of 1989, David Francis Brom was sentenced to 4 counts of first-degree murder in Olmsted County District Court. Sentence number 1 and 4 remained concurrent, and Mr. Brom was paroled from those sentences on January 16th of 2007. Sentence number 2 started on January 17th of 2007, and Mr. Brom was paroled from this sentence on May 21st of 2022. Mr. Brom is currently serving sentence number 3. This is a 17-year life sentence, and his parole eligibility date was originally September 23rd of 2037. Due to legislation regarding individuals who were juveniles at the time of their offense, Mr. Brom now has the opportunity to be reviewed by the Supervised Release Board after serving a minimum of 30 years. Today's review represents Mr. Brom's second juvenile offense review after serving approximately 36 years of incarceration. This includes his credit of 605 days given by the courts. Given the changes by the legislature regarding juvenile offense cases, Mr. Brom is eligible to be considered for parole as of February 17th, 2018. Thank you. I turn this matter over to the board. Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brom. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
I would like to start out, you've been through this before, start out by asking you to tell the board what it is you'd like to see happen as a result of today's meeting.
I'd like to walk away from today's meeting with an understanding of what a step-down process might look like for me.
Can you talk about your readiness, your journey, what led you to here, and the extent to which and how that, in your view, readied you for being considered for parole?
What led me to this point in my life?
Yeah, and your readiness, if you for parole as you've described.
Okay. Yeah. So I've kind of spent my time the best that I can to change the things about my life that led me to the despair and the decisions that I made and the actions that I took, the crimes that I committed.
I tried to change everything that I could about myself. And I believe that through the help of staff, programs, the support system I have in my life, I'm a good example of what a transformation can look like in a person's life through the Department of Corrections. I think that I've demonstrated consistency in that progress and in that maturing and growth, and I believe that I'm ready for parole.
So we've had a chance to talk about this in prior hearings, but I think it's, for purposes here, I think it's important. As you know, that the gravity of this offense is immense. Not just the impact on your family, but the community, and as you say, the ripple effect over the course of time. But as you think about, can you help give a sense of understanding of, through the lens of today, what happened that could allow you to engage in the conduct and the taking the lives of your family members, as you look back now through the lens of experience and history and the range of experiences and services that you participate in? How do you understand what you did at that time?
Yeah. First, if I could just take a minute to talk about the effects of the crime on others. I would just like to apologize to the family and friends of Bernard, Paulette, Diane, and Richard. I caused tremendous loss in their lives, incredible grief and pain, and left them with confusion and unanswered questions. And I apologize for that loss, for that grief, for the murders that I committed and the effect that it had on their life. I'd also like to apologize to the courts, the court officials, the sheriffs, who just as a matter of the service that they provide to their community, that they were a witness to the crimes that I committed. And I apologize for the impact that had on their lives. And lastly, to the neighborhood, to the church we attended, the schools we were enrolled in, and the community of Rochester, I apologize for the ripple effects of losing an entire family in such a horrific way. And to give an idea of what leads a person to commit the murders that I did, I struggled with depression for some time, and it had clouded my thoughts, and it clouded my my ability to process things. And I had grown to a short-sighted view that I thought these things were going to last forever. And I knew I couldn't live that way forever. And in the cloud of depression, I started to believe that other people were at fault for the way I felt. And unfortunately, that fault I placed on my parents and my family, because I was often more depressed at home than I was in other areas of life.
Hey, it's me. I have Brom in here for a comment.
When did
ROM?
When did you first start to get or gain a level of insight or clarity or an understanding of the depression? When did that begin to happen?
I started to understand a little bit about it when I was in the Oaks Treatment Center in Texas. That was a beneficial environment for me. They were supportive and encouraging, and but I really didn't grasp the effect that it was having on my life until it started to kind of dissipate. That cloud started to dissipate in my life as I pursued my faith and as I pursued investments that other people were making in my life, probably closer to my early 20s.
Along the way, were there reconnections that you made with people who were significantly harmed by the offense?
Yeah, I've had connection with several family members, all four of my grandparents, some aunts and uncles, and my older brother. I've also had some contact with a friend of my sister's. So I have had, not all of those have continued, but I have had some interactions with people who were affected by the crimes I committed.
What was that like for you? And as you, especially like as those things were happening or occurring or were about to occur, what was the experience of that? What was that like?
It's always difficult to hear how painfully you've affected someone else's life. And so it was a difficult thing to hear, and to hear how it didn't end. The effects of the crimes didn't end after the funeral or after a short period of time, that they continue to feel the effects of loss and grief. It was also honestly sometimes difficult to hear their acceptance of me into their lives as I struggled to go through the journey of finding a way to forgive and accept myself. It was difficult sometimes to hear their forgiveness and acceptance of me.
As you think about, and I asked that question not to do for any other reason than you've had transition, and what you're seeking from the board is further transition, and all of the things that happen bring something new or different, What do you anticipate, or what would you expect if the board were to move you forward, or look at grant parole, whatever the board would choose to do? How do you feel like you would manage or be able to deal with that type of a transition Well, certainly you're not the person you were when you were 16 years old, but nonetheless, the offense is a reality. And how do you think you would manage that?
So, I mean, with any challenge that I face, I believe I have a level of emotional maturity now in order to deal with and recognize what I'm feeling and to work through those emotions. And when that becomes a challenge to me, I have a very strong support system. And so I rely on the advice, counsel, and help of other people that are in my life. And they can usually speak to me in a way that's helpful. And going forward, I also know that I have resources in the community that are available to me that I can reach out to. I'm working with a couple peer recovery specialists and things of that nature. And lastly, I also have, when there's challenges that I face, I'll know I have a parole officer that I can turn to for for help, and ultimately other corrections staff that I can turn to for help.
Do you you talked about the desire to talk about like what next steps would look like, and you have done a lot of different work around release planning, and have developed a pretty comprehensive one that we've looked at even prior to this meeting, during your previous meeting. Can you talk about what, just like what if you could write your ticket, what would that look like, and what would a good transition look like to David Brom?
If I could write my ticket, I'm not sure if that's what I would envision the board most likely deciding. I think is a more prudent conversation, but what I would think would be a good outcome would be for the board to tell me about how much time they would like me to serve here in minimum, to continue to show that I can work in the community in the way that I have been, and be productive in the work that I'm doing here and the transition that I'm making here. And then with the idea of possibly moving to a halfway house at some point in time, working at the bridge in the beginning of that halfway house as part of that transition, and then through the halfway house continuing to gain employment outside the bridge, outside the Department of Corrections, and continue to save money and work on building the support system that will make a successful transition into the community on parole.
Thank you for that. I think those are the primary questions I have. Others?
I don't know if this is a question, maybe it is, or comment, but what I was struck with, Mr. Brom, in your story was the sense that in the time that you've spent incarcerated, that you not only made it through that experience, but you seem to have thrived in that environment from pretty early on. So many awards, education awards, so many programs completed, PPE, all the thing, the mentoring. You were mentored immediately, and it just really struck me that what you perhaps didn't find in your own home or in school or in your community, you have found in prison. And I think just even as you're talking now, when Commissioner Schnell gave you the opportunity to talk about your vision, and you kind of talked about what's more prudent is what we're going to do. So I think maybe just something for you to think about moving forward is your own efficacy, your own decision-making. I think it's wonderful you've got the relationships and community that you do. And going forward, you'll be the decider at some point of what you're going to do. And just a thing to have you think about. My background's in therapy and in school-based therapy, and I'm just sorry that your 16-year-old self did not get the treatment for the depression that you were experiencing. So I think you were failed in that regard.
Other questions, thoughts?
I may comment. I'm struck by the phrase, Commissioner, the reality of the offense. As a parent of a murdered daughter, I believe I share, or I've had view of that reality. Helpful for me has been the phrase, I got to do it myself, but I can't do it alone. I look for an opportunity to hook up with you, so to speak. What's been your experience of working together with other parents who are grieving because of the offense? Or what's been the experience of us dealing with that in the many opportunities you've taken and created with incarceration? How do we share, or how do we work together to deal with that reality? Bingo. Or how have you found what's working for you?
I really look at a restorative approach to it, a restorative justice approach to it, where I think sometimes just getting together and sharing your experiences and sharing the journey that you've had, the impacts that crime has had on your life, I think that can be an avenue towards healing and transformation in people's lives as they understand that their actions affect more than just their own life. Their actions affect the lives of others. Both positive and negative actions have ripple effects. And so I think sharing those stories, I think is beneficial toward healing.
Where have those opportunities been nurtured within the system? What have been some of the barriers for sharing those opportunities?
Some of the barriers to those opportunities just lie in the nature of incarceration is that you're separated. So there's not always an avenue for contact to be made. It's also difficult. A lot of times there's, and this is entirely up to a victim to have, but there are no contact orders, and sometimes the Department of Corrections wants a person to not have contact with surviving family members of victims. And that's always been an issue that I've addressed when I've been asked to sign paperwork that says I will not have contact with surviving family members of victims. So I can't sign that paperwork because I've been in contact with family members. So that's a challenge in the department. It's also a challenge, to be honest. There's a matter of accountability. That it can be a difficult thing to be accountable for the crimes you've committed, for the way that you've harmed other people. That can be extremely challenging personally to be fully accountable for that.
I understand that to be, or at least I think I face that. What's the criteria you use to assess sufficient accountability? Big question in my mind yet.
For me, I look at accountability kind of one, accountability involves understanding the impacts of your actions, the crimes that you committed, understanding the ripple effects and the people's lives that you've harmed and how you've harmed them. So just one, gaining an understanding of that. I think another aspect of that accountability involves making apologies and doing your best to, if you can, repair the harm. And obviously, in my case, that you cannot repair certain harms, but to do your best to provide healing in other circumstances, in other areas where you can, giving back to communities in whatever way that you're able. And then thirdly, for me, accountability also involves recognizing the changes that need to be made in your life, looking at the things that led you to hurt people the way you did, to take the lives that you did, and making the changes in your life that need to be made in order that does not repeat.
I concur, and I appreciate, and I think I've found healing and strength in all of the above as well. I guess I would add one more. I think at times, as you mentioned, there are opportunities or maybe need to change some of the system criteria or policies or opportunities for victim and offenders to dialogue and to meet and to interact. A lot of fear, a lot of unknown, a lot of yet to be determined things are I think, getting in the way is my view. But I appreciate your efforts, and it looks like you've made great success in that along the way, and my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a reminder that the camera is over here.
Just so you know, Mr. Brom, there are screens across from people, and so they may not be looking at you. They're looking at a screen. So just so you're aware.
I appreciated being eye to eye with you and realize you are not eye to eye to me. Thank you.
Can I just ask one question about, you did the clinical pastoral education program, and if you can maybe describe that a little bit, and the peer recovery specialist training, and then what or how those things might apply to your future, whatever that looks like.
The clinical pastoral education was an opportunity to take part in it's a master's level program. It's a chaplain internship, and the class that I participated in involved the teachers and the instructors coming in to the prison in Stillwater, along with 3 or 4 chaplain interns from the community, and then usually 3 or 4 inmates that were also at that point interning as chaplains in the prison. And we would take the classes together and listen to lectures. And the main thrust for me of the clinical pastoral education was just deeply listening to people, and not just listening to respond, but listening to hear the stories that they're telling. And then also listening for, a lot of times there's a lot of tragedy and trauma and hurt that people share in their stories, and listening for the examples of strength and victory over those experiences. And so for me, chaplaincy really involved listening deeply to people. And there was a narrative therapy aspect to it that involved specifically listening for areas of success and ways that you can bring about that awareness that they do have more strength than probably they realize they have. The peer recovery dealt more with, instead of spiritual issues, dealt more with substance use issues. And it had an approach that was similar. They used a thing called motivational interviewing, and it's somewhat similar to narrative therapy, except it involves more active listening and focuses on questions that lead towards change and moving a person towards greater access to change in their life. And the mentorship program in St. Cloud, I'd also like to mention that dealt a lot more with the mental health aspect of things. So I felt like I really had a good, after that program, I really felt like I had a good, well-rounded understanding of how to deal with people in crisis, whether it be through spiritual means, through recovery, or through mental health issues. I felt like it really made me well-rounded in that aspect. And as far as in the community goes, I look forward to an opportunity to connect with either a recovery community organization or a ministry or some nonprofit that deals with people who are in crisis or experiencing hard times, and being able to share the knowledge, the skills that I've gained over those classes with them.
Just last thing for me, I just would just say I appreciate you. I know that getting moved to the St. Cloud was after being in a medium setting. It was a little bit of a shift, and going back. But I really appreciate the role that you played, and the challenge of kind of going back inside to a more close setting, and applying those skills in that setting. So I just want to acknowledge and also the updates that you provided were helpful and useful as well. So thank you for that.
I have a couple of questions actually. So in some of this is a little bit of a follow-up to one of my colleagues and what she had asked. And so my question is largely kind of framed by like your experience from when you first came into prison at the age of 18 or whatever that was. Like your trajectory does not align with most, meaning came in, you did not see a lot of the disciplinary stuff. I mean, 37 years and you've had one violation for having too many people in your cell, I think is what I had read. That almost makes it harder for me to wrap my head around. So can you, to what do you attribute your success when prior to that you engaged in what in your packet is described as an incomprehensible offense? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense. I think, so first I think that my record does not necessarily reflect the reality of my early incarceration. In the fact that, while I did not have discipline like many people have, I did have a somewhat poor attitude towards a lot of things, and so it demonstrated itself in a lot of times I just passed on opportunities that were available to me because I didn't think it was necessary if I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison. So after getting my high school diploma, some of the staff wanted me to go to college because Pell Grants were offered back then. And I really didn't see any point in getting a college degree because I felt like I could get any job in prison without a college degree. And so I did have employment. I was employed. And so, but it doesn't necessarily demonstrate what was going on internally in me. And so I think my record is a little deceptive in that sense, because I was struggling when I first came to prison, and it was mostly with hopelessness and some despair. One of the biggest things that did continue to move me towards transformation was my faith, which I encountered early in my sentence. And so that helped me. There were also staff who really invested in me that was an encouragement to not engage in fighting, drinking, drugs, not engage in those activities. There were staff who invested in me. I had friends who were strongly invested in me. I did not want to disappoint my grandparents after I had harmed them so much by continuing in destructive behavior. That was my grandparents visiting me I didn't want to ever have to explain to them that I was in segregation for doing something that I shouldn't have been doing. And so that was a strong motivator for me as well early in my incarceration.
Have you, I think earlier you had talked about, at the time of the offense that you were really deeply mired in depression. Is that, and I think I had also read that you had gone to I'm assuming a mental health treatment program, I think it was in Texas, or have you had ongoing behavioral health contact, or is it, did the depression just kind of lift and now it's not something you struggle with anymore? Just kind of curious what that has been like for you.
It wasn't an overnight change in my life, but over the course of a few years, the people that came into my life that mentored me really helped challenge me to look at things differently, to challenge some of the thoughts that I had, and not just accept negative views about what my future or what my life could look like. And so over time, it took some work, and some of the tools that I learned in Texas, while I didn't get to complete the work in Texas, some of the tools that I learned there and some of the support that I was given there helped navigate some of the emotions that I had going forward after Texas. So, and I have not had contact with ongoing contact with behavioral health, other than through some of the programs that I participated in, but not in a counseling session. But early in my 20s, the depression did slowly lift from my life, and I was able to gain a more hopeful attitude towards my future and what life could look like.
Last one for me, and I apologize if I'm reading more into it than maybe I should, but I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this. So earlier, when you were kind of giving your opening statement, you indicated that you apologized to the family of, and that's your family. I'm just wondering, should I read anything into that phrasing?
It's so for me, I don't know if there's anything to read into that. I recognize that not everyone in my family would accept me today as family. And so I don't feel like it's appropriate in an apology to say to my family who I've harmed, because they may not be accepting of me as their family.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification.
Mr. Brom, I just want to follow up on some of the mental health issues you experienced early on, and you made a statement that you didn't feel the need to pursue additional support to address your mental health needs since your brother passed away in 2016. Could you talk a little bit about that? Why did that? What was it?
So when my older brother passed away, I felt a great deal of grief, and so I struggled with that grief for a couple of weeks, and I was considering contacting the mental health staff in Stillwater at that time, and my pastor came up to visit with me on that weekend that I was considering reaching out to the mental health staff. And we had a very helpful conversation about grief and loss. And I felt like I turned a page in that experience and in that journey through my conversation with my pastor. That was very helpful. And so after that visit, I didn't feel like it was necessary anymore to reach out to the mental health staff because I felt like I had gotten what I needed from my conversation with my pastor.
You know, you referenced the time that you spent in Austin, Texas, and the diagnosis you got there. Do you remember the diagnosis they gave you? It was depression. But then it went on to talk about schizoid paranoia and bipolar, things like that. And I think, and I don't know if that came from Texas specifically, it just in the report, it said somewhere along the line, or maybe that's my wording. It didn't specifically say where that diagnosis came from. But in your experience, it sounds like you don't experience voices or any of that. Could you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not sure early on where those diagnoses came from because I have not experienced hallucinations or either auditory or visual. And so I'm not sure that the schizophrenic diagnosis is accurate. And the bipolar, I've not experienced those kinds of swings in my mood, so I don't understand where those diagnoses. I'm not certain what factors I had that made them come up with that diagnosis.
Do you think it was when you were at Austin?
There was a period of time early in my incarceration where I went through several different psychological evaluations with different psychiatrists, and I'm guessing that some of them came up with different diagnoses. I don't think my doctor in Texas was focused on evaluating me for diagnosis, but I'm not sure.
Do you see a need for mental health therapy going forward as you step down and leave?
Yeah, I do look forward to an opportunity to have conversations with a counselor as I step down to just help sort out emotions that I might experience, challenges that I might face, just to have another network of support in my life.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
In reading the information provided to me, I think you provided you were seeing it, and you provided a lot of unique interactions, particularly with your, there we go. Hi there. Unique interactions with your fellow inmates. My brief encounter talking with those who are incarcerated, standing out and being more of an individual or having your own sort of notoriety can be a danger as much as a source of strength and pride. And can you talk a little bit about both sides of that? Of sort of being the unique health provider is the words I would use, but what are the blessings, what are the hardship with that?
The blessings is that I get to walk with people as they experience some real tragic moments in their life and provide an opportunity to hold hope out for them. And so that's one of the great honors and benefits of being able to provide some help and healing to the men that I serve time with. Another benefit is I'm true to myself. I'm true to ultimately how I was raised. And there's something empowering in being who you are and not trying to be fake. And there's something freeing in being who you are. The challenges are, it's heartbreaking to watch other people just continue to destroy their own lives, continue to destroy other people's lives. It's painful to watch people struggle with addiction and mental health and not reach out for assistance and not reach out for any kind of change or progress in their life. There's a challenge in peer pressure to go with the crowd when the culture is about violence and a predatory, violent nature. There's a challenge of dealing with peer pressure there. But all of those things have kind of made me stronger, and I think also in a sense more sensitive to the struggles that I've witnessed other people experience in their lives.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to open it up to Mr. Welker. I just want to say thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. And I would just like to open the floor to you to speak to your sense of where Mr. Brom is at and any other thoughts you have for the board.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it and appreciate being part of this. Yeah, I was just reflecting and thinking when I first started seeing David, I was 29 years old. I'm 63. I know him. I know him very well. I've seen a lot of growth. He's the finest man I've ever met. He's grown. He's very. He's got a gift of encouragement. I guess I'll say it that way. And it's been a real blessing to be a part of his life and be with him on the journey.
Can you describe just the connection and how this came to be?
Yeah. So David was a friend of another inmate who was incarcerated at the time in St. Cloud, and they were pretty close. And then and I was visiting this other inmate at the time, he got transferred to Faribault, and he thought that it'd be good if I could begin seeing David and encourage Dave in his time. And so that started in, I'm going to say summer of 91. And that's how we got connected. It was through another inmate that I was seeing at the time.
When you say that you witnessed considerable change in him over the course of time, what are some of the notable changes that you did observe in that span of time?
Yeah, well, I think I just saw him grow emotionally. He has learned a lot of skills on how to deal with different emotions, how to identify how actions are coming from those feelings, and those feelings come from thoughts, and those thoughts come from the heart. And so he's learned a lot about who he is, and he's learned a lot about how to identify issues more clearly, get to the root of issues, and deal with those in constructive, positive ways. And over the years, he's gotten really, really good at it and has been able to share that with other people.
Excellent. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Walker?
What do you anticipate, Mr. Welker, will be your relationship with him from this point forward? Should he be released at some point? What would you anticipate your involvement in his life, and how would you characterize what you anticipate your relationship would be?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. As I understand from David's perspective, he would like the relationship to continue. I would as well. I would anticipate it would. The gentleman I was referring to, who was an inmate that got me connected to David, was released in 1995, and he and I still have a relationship where we get together monthly. And we meet in Wilmer, Minnesota. We walk for a couple hours. We go out and have lunch, and we talk about where we're at in life and how I can be helping. And the mentorship kind of continues there in that relationship. So it's been, I don't know. I started seeing him in '87. So yeah, I'm still in this life 37 years later. I would anticipate a similar route with David, where I would meet regularly with him and be there for him whenever he needs me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'm going to, before I open close the discussion and we begin deliberation, I want to just briefly open the floor to you, Mr. Brom, to make any final comments.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and I'm grateful for the questions that you've asked and the thoughts that you've provoked from me, and just look forward to hearing the results.
All right. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to close the discussion. During board discussion deliberation, the board will not entertain questions or allow interruptions. And with that, I would open the discussion to the board.
I have a question regarding the piece in his release plan about meeting with the sheriff of Olmsted County and the prosecutors. When do you anticipate that happening? While he is still incarcerated to some degree, or once he's out on supervised release?
I've had just the preliminary conversations there, and I think it would be whenever they might be willing to do that. So that would just really be
either or.
It could be either or. It's just something that came up, I think, as a result of the community investigation originally.
I guess I'd like to see Mr. Brom on the track to parole, and I don't know the right language exactly. I mean, he's at Lino, right, minimum right now. So whatever the step down process is, I'd like to. I certainly think he's ready, and like to see that happen. And I don't mean like fast track, like
right,
but. He said earlier, I'd like to know what the path is going to be here, and I'd like to see him on it.
Just for context, so people know that when we had met with him, I met with him just over a year ago or so. We implemented that move to St. Cloud, and then I think it was just in December he was transferred back at the minimum, because I had made the commitment at that time that he would go there for a year to work as mentor and intake units. So he did that. So that's where he's at now. So it's just been, I don't even know if it's a month yet.
Correct. It was 12/3 that he got to minimum.
So just over a month.
And then probably started it quick, not too long after that.
12/3 again, where?
He got to minimum.
At what?
On December,
at
just
Lino
the beginning of
Lino.
December.
Okay, thank you. So move, if that is a motion, or I'm ready to go with what the next steps towards release, towards parole. Initiate those in the most expedient way.
Well, clarification, do you mean like move him on from minimum and ICWIT as soon as possible, because he just got there? So I was struggling with, is it appropriate to he's only been there a month to then move him on. I think work release would be the next. So I just want clarity what the motion is.
Keep moving.
Yeah, clarity, he met his mark, the conviction mark as to the end of his sentence. That's been met a number of years ago already, right?
With the law change, yes.
Yeah, with the law change, it was 2018.
Okay. So the next, is there another date ahead of him, or one of our opportunities is to set that date?
We would set that date. That determination. I think the question really becomes, is and this is all over the place. Where if you look at step down, do we? What does it look like? How much time would we want him to be a minimum on a ICWA crew? And I think part of this, and again, I'm not advocating for anything here other than I think part of the reality is, and we didn't ask Mr. Brom about this, but for a lot of people who've been incarcerated for a long time, even just that whole notion of all of a sudden you're cutting grass at a park someplace, working for some city as an ICWA crew is a kind of a pretty crazy life change when you think about being locked up from, in this case, 16. And so that, and I'm not saying that, if we think about this, do you look at this through the lens of what does he need? I don't know that question. What do we feel comfortable with? I think it's a question of, is there a period of time that you'd like to see him there before he would move to work release? But this is entirely a board decision versus set by the minimum confinement.
Thank you.
I don't have any concern that he needs to stay any amount of time in minimum, given what he's done for 37 years and all the accomplishments and all the growth. I mean, the psychologist talked about notable and substantial growth. So I don't see a benefit of more time incarcerated. At the same time, I think your point, Commissioner, about, okay, this is a crazy change in life now, so I think if there's gradual movement, it's about get used to this. Okay, get used to this, and what does your support need to look like now? What's it need to look like now? But I don't see a benefit in prison programming or any of, like oftentimes we'll say, they need to do more programming. That's not the case here. He's done plenty.
Isn't one of the things that will come with his pursuing this work crew that he'll have access to money that he wouldn't have had before? And I think that given his being incarcerated from such a young age, managing that would be a challenge, would be something you'd have to learn, establishing some community connections. So I would see those steps as being toward his success on the outside, helping to build that. So could I amend the motion to say deny parole, continue him in step down with the goal that he get to work release next, and maybe review, and I guess the question is how much time in his current, I would think 6 months at least before he moves to work release. So I'll put that motion forward.
So let me just make sure so we would be denying parole, continuing him. I'll figure out what that is after, but we have 6 months. You would like to see 6 months in minimum before a transition to work release. Then the question is, I think it's either two questions can be approached either way. How long would you like to see him in work release, or when would the board like to see him come back? Because that either way, you're going to get to the same end. Do you want him to do a year in work release, 6 months in work release, or do you want to set it out to 18 months and that's 6 months in a minimum? he would actually spend a month there already. So you could, if you wanted to do something odd, do 17. That would be a year, then a work release. So I think these are questions that would have to be refined.
The question I have, or the encouragement I would have, in work release, I agree, it's more of the community supports the access to what's happening and that transition into the community. I believe that can be accomplished in 6 months. Or can you get anything more out of that than what's going to be available in 6 months or less? But it's that set up, that connection with the community. I think work release then really opens that up. Whereas the minimum is just sort of a good ground to move into work release. So I'd say 6 months, or can you talk a little bit more about the opportunities for community interaction, community exposure?
While he's in work release, you're talking about?
While he's in work release?
I think that that really can be somewhat dependent in terms of things that we would want him to do, but it is intended to be a transition, just another transition. And one of the things that we had talked about when I had seen him a year ago or so, a year over that, was the whole notion that that a lot of people at his age would have had a lot of movements, experiences with transitions, and so that was one of the reasons for even transitioning him back to St. Cloud, and so that was a part of that thinking. So I guess in terms of work release, I think we have had people in work release for long periods of time. Generally, that year is kind of where we don't like to go super longer than that, because that could be really challenging for folks. And we've had people go less than that. And the hard part here is that, we decide this, it's not based upon some like measures, right? That the work release staff are looking at. So I think that's, a question. I think, if you were saying do 6 months on work release, and bring them back, that's a possible, and then there could be an evaluation of, does he need to do additional time in that? You could do a paper review, and by paper review, ask work release to submit documentation as to what they see, and then the board could just do that paper review and then decide, do you want to bring them back in the next month or two? I mean, so this is really wide open.
The other opportunity I would hope is, or when would it be available, I guess is my question. He has provided services to other inmates and has been selected and placed at St. Cloud because of his capacities. What capacities or would that be new programs that he could be initiating in minimum now? But he's got a lot to offer. How can those opportunities be available as well?
I think he will. I think just saying, but I think the experience and the record is that he's done that where he's been, and so he would continue. And whatever that looks like in terms of even his description of whether it's some type of chaplaincy or nonprofit work or crisis work. I don't know what the future looks like, but I think it sounds like that's a little bit of the direction he seems to be pursuing. And I think, what that looks like in a work release setting, I don't know. He talked a little bit about Bridge, and I think he's got a unique focus. If it's that kind of, the Bridge can be a really helpful thing in terms of job search skills and some of those sorts of things. I don't know, given his focus, if that's, the place to go for some of those things. That tends to be much more, focused on, on job search skills and job readiness, and yet minimum, and ICWA can provide some of that.
I think the growth in restorative practice in the state, the Office of Restorative Practice, all the grants that are going out, the advisory, county advisory groups and that are going to provide some terrific opportunities for him. and they're looking for people with lived experience. So,
would there be opportunities for him, since he's now at Lino, to participate in that capacity of mentor for Prison Fellowship Academy?
Yeah, it's harder, a little bit harder when you're on the outside and going in, because that's just tends to be a bit more challenging. Not that it's impossible, but that
yeah.
And there's a level of, I mean, there are a number of people who come out of prison fellowship that end up in minimum. So there can be a bit of that community connection that just exists more naturally in the minimum setting because of PFA being on the inside.
Mm-hmm. Well, can I amend your motion to say deny parole, continue on the track to parole with a presumptive review in 1 year, thinking he does some more time where he is right now in minimum, and then he goes to work release, and then we review on paper, or he could come back to see if he's ready for parole.
What would be the wishes of the board? Do you want to have him come in and see him and talk to him a year? Or would you want? I'm just by way of the motion here.
Yeah, I'd go with presumptive, but somebody can amend it if they feel strongly.
I would prefer longer if I'm being honest, and I say that not as some sort of arbitrary attempt to, extend the incarceration custodial status any longer than necessary. It's more so, I think the gravity of the change and what those changes represent. I think it's just. And I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't be successful. It's just more time to make sure that there aren't any sort of whatever, hiccups, just adjusting to that ongoing step down. Yeah, I mean, I am just more comfortable with a more with a longer step down. Now, doesn't need to be 5 years, but something a little bit longer than a year would be my preference. I'm only one board member.
Are you concerned about the Olmsted County community?
Absolutely. That's absolutely a part of it, is the feedback from the law enforcement community, the prosecutor's office, like that. That's a real thing that, even statutorily, like it's one of the factors. So that's a thing for me.
Do you have any sense of like what would make you feel more comfortable around that side of it?
A year and a year. A year minimum, a year work release, come back. Come back before the board.
Well, so okay, go ahead.
This gentleman has displayed to me a great capacity for positive change. And I'm much more encouraged about his rate of growth and change and contribution to the community. I'm real concerned about the rate of change among the law enforcement component that prosecuted him originally and their more static response. And I see a lot of opportunities available to this gentleman, opportunities to address to the static response of law enforcement and so forth. I don't see that even available right now. Or he could be one of the persons that might start breaking into that. But boy, that's a big mountain. So I'm saying, look, the opportunities are, I don't want him denied opportunities due to the permanence of other attitudes.
Well, can we just do I made a motion, can we just see if it goes anywhere, and then if it doesn't, we start over?
So I just want to make sure, I just want to go back here and just figure out, did we have a motion in a second? I know you talked about it like a motion, but I don't think we had a second, did we?
No. Yeah.
We don't have a second.
Okay. Okay, so your motion then, Don, would be, are you withdrawing it, and then we'll move to Chris's? Is that?
Your motion was amending yours.
Yeah, so just instead of, we'll just withdraw it because it was.
It's up to you.
Read the motion. Help me with the motion right now. The motion that we understand. I'm not sure I understand what the motion is. I need to hear it.
Deny parole, continue for 1 year. We'll say with a review at the end of 1 year, where during that time he progresses from minimum to work release.
So a year from now, he could be finished with work release.
It could be.
Is what I'm understanding.
It could be.
And I would go along with that.
And we're talking about bringing, he would come back in
I
for
think,
an
yeah,
in-person
I
review.
think so. Yeah.
Okay, so he basically continued for a year with a period of time spent in minimum, and then moved to work release, and then would be seen in a year, roughly that period of time.
I'll second that.
And there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? The one thing I would just say is, and I say this having come out of spending almost 30 years in law enforcement and working on that side of it, and one of the things that I'm mindful of in this process is that, and I think even Mr. Brom noted this, is that along the way, people who are in the system end up being harmed by exposure to these incidents themselves. And I just will speak to that just on a personal level of spending as many years as I did doing what I did, that's a reality still for me. And part of the objective that I had as a police officer and then police chief was at least the way the system that we have is set up is that success and is grounded oftentimes in system and accountability and punishment. And I'm not seeing this as but that was what it was. And I think it is a weird position even for me personally in some instances to have been on the law enforcement side, even with some cases that I've been involved with in this role. And then on this side of it. And so I just want to say that because I understand where law enforcement and prosecutors can oftentimes be in their response to these cases, and in particular cases that have such a pronounced community impact as well. That I get it, and I don't say that for any other reason but just to provide some context because.
I'd like to add to that one of the things that struck me all along in this experience of 6 months is the trauma, and trauma on all kinds of levels. And I think the vicarious and secondary trauma that police officers and people on the scene and what have you, that I think also impacts their perspective and approach is not, it's not, there's not an awareness of that. And I think I'd love to see us do more about all the trauma.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, just as long as we had the comments section here open.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't think the DOC is in control of this, but that's why I asked the question about sitting down with law enforcement. Not that it would change anything, but that was, I can't remember if that was Mr. Brom's suggestion or somebody else?
It came up during the course of our last hearing.
Yeah, is that a possibility in all of this?
We we open the door to those options and go from there. But I think certainly, and I've had this conversation not just in this case, but just I'm talking about in general, where I've invited colleagues of mine from the police chief side and sheriffs to come in and participate in some of these conversations, and that's been helpful. Oftentimes, it's not a case that they were necessarily involved in, but we met with people who, were part of the circle that, we heard of earlier in our conversation with Mr. Spann. We hear about with Mr. Brom, some of these folks who create that community that is very positive and wanting to move forward. And I think, those things need to continue because I think that's, it is one of the places that can be eye-opening. And I think it doesn't open a trauma door that, where people were directly involved in a case.
Well, could we proceed with the motion? I suspect it may get voted down and then somebody can make a new one.
Okay, so we have a motion, and to that motion, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Board Member Bray.
Yes.
Board Member Earhart abstains. Board Member Larson.
No.
Board Member Ramstead.
Yes.
Board Member Nelson.
Yes.
Board Member Struford.
Yes.
And Schnell will vote yes. We have by a vote of 5-1, one abstention. The motion prevails. Mr. Brom, we will work with the staff there in terms of identifying kind of a timeline of what this looks like. We'll work with work release staff as well. Probably just if we look at, cutting this in half, you'd be looking at another, maybe it's 5 months there. We'll work with work release, and HRU will connect with Dan there and begin to work out a plan for that. And then we'd be seeing you sometime likely in January of next year. Any questions about that?
No.
Obviously, the standard expectations remain discipline-free, which hasn't been a big problem, other than that one time when you had an extra person in your cell, as was noted. And then, again, I would just say that, and you and I have talked about this, and I think the issue of, what we expect and what you owe us to continue to do what you're doing in terms of investments in self, living your best life, and the ways that can affect others. So we would certainly hope that and expect that will continue. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. And Mr. Welker, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, our last review that we have scheduled, does anybody need a quick break, or are we good to go into the file review? This is a non-appearance file review.
Question, history, how is this done any differently when the person is not there, or any procedure or process changes? It's I think it's new for me. But
there is really not much of a difference. We provide that opportunity, that there was the waiver in this case, and then we really are just looking at, it's a paper file review, and then what is it that we would like to see put in place if whatever that looks like, and go from there.
Would you also need an introduction for those who are listening?
Yep.
All right, so give us some basis. Good afternoon, everyone. Rebecca Holmes-Larson, Executive Officer of Hearings and Release and the Supervised Release Board. We're here today to review Mr. Jordan Metoxen, who has signed a waiver of non-appearance and chosen not to participate in his review today. Here with me at the Minnesota Department of Corrections Central Office is our Commissioner and Chair of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell, along with board members Christine Gray, Member Andrew Larson, Member Cheryl Ramstad, Juvenile Expert Member Jody Nelson, Juvenile Expert Member Don Strufert, and we also have our newest board member, Ms. Joe Earhart, observing by video today. Our records indicate that on June 9th, 2006, in Duluth, Minnesota, Mr. Metoxen and an accomplice walked up behind a man who had just left a liquor store carrying a 12-pack of beer. They knocked him to the ground and stomped and kicked him to death, then took the beer and the victim's wallet. The victim, Donald O'Brien, was transported to the hospital where he died the following evening due to his injuries. On November 2nd of 2006, Jordan Michael Metoxen was sentenced to 40 years for murder second degree in St. Louis County District Court. Due to new legislation regarding individuals who were juveniles at the time of their offense, Mr. Metoxen now has the opportunity to be reviewed by the Supervised Release Board after serving a minimum of 15 years. Today's review represents his initial review after serving approximately 18 years of incarceration. His confinement release date was originally July 26th of 2034. Given the changes by the legislature regarding juvenile cases, Mr. Metoxen is eligible to be considered for release as of June 7th of 2021. It should also be noted that Mr. Metoxen also has a consecutive sentence of 15 months in which he received 90 days of credit for time served for fourth degree assault on a correctional officer. Thank you, and I'll turn this matter over to the board.
So as was mentioned, Ms. Metoxen is not going to be here. We do have in front of us, the record, as I recall, he did not participate in the comprehensive risk assessment process either. So what we have is one that was completed without really on a file review. I think Mr. Metoxen has a extensive kind of history of disciplinary issues, and he actually, I think in some places described or told case manager, I believe, just some of the challenges that he's had because of, in part, the length of the amount of time that he has spent in segregation and over the course of time, and an apparent interest, considerable interest in tattooing, I guess. Some of the stuff that he's been involved in more recently, but he did have previously, as was noted by the offense, some involvement in violent behavior, and some of that, one of that at least, was a staff assault, serious staff assault. He has not done much. And I would say that, generally speaking, and this is just Paul Schnell speaking. When I was doing these cases myself, and previously with the advice and counsel of the advisory council, I would oftentimes set a fairly lengthy term of continuance, and then also provide an off-ramp for that thing. So maybe it's 6-8 years, but we would see you in 2 or 3 if you do X, Y, or Z. Demonstrate some positive movement so that there is both an opportunity for him to have an off-ramp to do that, and yet if you don't, and you're not going to have the chance really to come back unless you demonstrate something. So that has been at least some of the approach I've tried to do, and for some people that has worked. For other people, it's just, I'll just sit for my whatever period of the continuance is, and fine. But for a number of them, it was like, okay, I'm going to do something and get back in to see him.
Well, in the off-ramp, I assume part of it would be CD treatment. That seems to be a big deal. Yeah. What does the 50 points mean? I mean, I get level 5. What is 50 points? What is that an indication of? Discipline, sort of, or?
Yeah, I can't give you the details of everything included.
Yeah, but that's, okay.
Yep.
And that's a high score.
That's why he's still at Oak Park.
Oak Park,
Okay. He's at closed.
His classification level is just like that.
Yeah. He has to accomplish some programming and things.
So that's got to be accessible. I mean, it's got to be accessible to him. I mean, it's programming. You definitely got to do more. I think of kind of the risk column and the protective factor column, and I was impressed with his cultural. I mean, it didn't get talked about hardly at all until at the end when you're with the grandmother and all that, but that he's a grass dancer, that he went to Dubai to dance. He's had these other like remarkable experiences in connection to culture that I think can be a protective factor as part of the, and then the tattooing isn't just tattooing, that he's like a skilled artist.
Correct, yeah.
And that there's been some of his art that's in whatever out there. So I think, continuing to invest in the positive pro-social things that he has available to him, while, clearly addiction is the thing, and that's got to be, had that not been the case, he'd be in a different place. So, I think time, but just like you talked about, Commissioner, and where's the hook, where's the hope, and yet you got a lot to do here, dude.
Yeah, because he's, right, if he doesn't do anything, he's got, 10 years, plus he's got that another 8 months, almost a year to do, so.
Yeah, and then he's got support from family, there's some of that
Yeah.
stuff too. He's got some stuff, but he's got more work to do.
So I'll make a motion, no parole, continue for 5 years. See if anything, or maybe 5 is too short for the off-ramp.
What if,
Maybe, go ahead.
like, what if it was 8 years?
Yeah, I was just gonna say 8
And
years.
then one of the things that we try to do is keep the off-ramp relatively short, so that, because again, it doesn't change, it just means they're coming back, right? And then, because that way there's some incremental opportunities for interventions. So if he were to do substance use disorder treatment, for instance, in the next 2 years or something like that, and then came back, all he's doing is coming back. He's not getting released, but it might be now we move you to this, or you get whatever different experiences.
Well, and to your point, I think it's trying to find that balance where it's close enough that it has meaning.
Right.
Because if it doesn't, then it's pointless.
Yeah, it feels like it's never going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Okay, so a motion to continue for 8 years with the conditions that he get into treatment, and upon completion could be seen sooner. I don't know if we need to specify that or not.
It's easier to do if we say, like, we're going to, with the off ramp is 2 years, because his treatment's going to be, he's not going to be an outpatient level treatment. He's, and part of, so he would probably be a max treatment guy, and that's a long program. Like, it can be 11 months, because there's cog skills in there. There's all kinds of stuff depending upon, where he goes. He'd probably end up in close.
He would most likely, he still has to earn his step down out of Oak Park.
Get out of
before he can get into said treatment. So just keep that in mind. And the treatment is probably going to take him 11 months. if he does well the whole time and stays discipline free. And so he's going to need a few months to step down out of Stillwater, I would imagine.
Go to Stillwater?
Or Oak Park, excuse me.
Go to Stillwater?
Or wherever the assessors determine the best treatment
Stillwater
program
where
is.
the tattoo program's at.
Yeah, that's
Would that
where
be a carrot in the future?
it could be in the future. I think that could be part of it if he were to be looked at to go to treatment over there for Atlantis, something like that at Stillwater, which would be the more natural move from max to close custody.
Just to recognize the talent in that, we see that you've got talent.
Yeah, I think he may be doing some stuff with art from the inside.
Nice.
As well. So
I do think that talent or what that opens for him, or he's open to that. My big concern is who can he sit down with that he can listen to and that he'll accept or even understand what the steps are. How do you get information to this man is sort of a blank for me right now. Dancing maybe has been, but where do you connect right now, or who can connect with him right now is my question.
Right now, it's his caseworker. So when the caseworker hears what the board decides, then the caseworker works with the other facility, the other staff at their facility to help him step down and get to where he needs to go to meet his goals.
And Don, are you asking like someone to try to, for lack of a better way of putting it, to get through to him, kind of start to enhance some of that motivation? I think if I read, or if I'm remembering correctly, I think it's the grandmother and
uncle,
whatever that, like they have some background in SUD and maybe a long time sober, so really encouraging that relationship and not knowing what that dynamic is like. I thought maybe she was on the visiting list, but
She was.
Okay,
She was
so
a really good letter from Victor. Victor makes room for them. And I wondered who Victor was and if he was part of a tribe and if that person could be helpful.
Well, there's the uncle. I think the uncle is a professor in South Dakota.
That's
so
the uncle.
Really encouraging that. Certainly, I think he does have opportunities for pro-social supports in the community, and really pushing on that. I think he's gotten just trapped in the prison culture and is having a hard time seeing the forest through the trees.
Like you might just be starting to see that.
I too got that impression that he may be starting to see that. So maybe there is some reason for
how to keep
him moving in that direction.
Yeah, I thought I was impressed with Mr. Brom when he talked about staff who made a difference in his early on that staff were there for him. So both of those. Is it possible to reach out to the family to say we really see you guys as being able to?
The caseworker can do that.
Caseworker can?
The caseworker can have conversations with them. Where's your best relationship? What your cultural support and sober sobriety support?
And even reach out to some of these folks who wrote on his behalf and just say, we really want, the board would really like to move him in a place where they see some of that progress, but any encouragement and motivation that you can help provide would be really helpful. All right, so I think we have. So you didn't say this, but we have a motion of doing deny parole 8 years with a off ramp, and would you be comfortable with us specifying at least 18 to 2 years?
Yeah, I was going to say 2 years.
Is that just really, because it's going to take some time to step them down first to get them out of here. So if we do 2 years and then he knows that there's there's a fork in the road here that can come as early as 2 years. And some things that we'd like to see them try to do. And we can certainly try and build out, even things like art from the inside, which, has been working with a lot of these guys and women, and they're taking their art all over the state. And, I don't know, did they say which tribe he was with?
Dakota.
He was Dakota. Anyway, so we have
criteria for the off-ramp then would be, is it completion?
Yeah, a successful completion of substance use disorder treatment.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
How about the discipline-free, given the fact
He won't finish treatment unless he is.
Oh, okay, so it's incorporated.
Yeah.
Point of information, if, say, he completes the CD treatment within a year, is there any vehicle available to him to request a review prior to, 18 months or 2 years?
2 years. The challenge is going to be, I think, with the fact that I think he's in restrictive housing now. Will have to work his way through that. Some of their step down relative to moving through that. As a general practice, we would not override that discipline that's been imposed. That he had to have to serve that out and finish that and then do this. But I hear, and I always get concerned because it shapes people's view, and spending that much time in restrictive housing is not a healthy place to be, and it limits. One of the things that we've been really focused a lot on agency-wide is how do you make sure that we know what programs actually reduce a person's points, and so doing cog skills is going to reduce his points.
Well, that's the deal with the points. How much
really,
or how little?
Yeah, so
you do
it's
with
how little, or your disciplinary history, your level of assaultiveness, compliance, program completions, being able to manage a work assignment. All of those things really contribute to a person's points. So all positive things reduce, visiting. Having people come in from the outside to visit. Well, you don't have that when you, are in restrictive housing. Access to programs become more challenging while you're inside. So it's all these things that actually make it hard to reduce your points if you're in there. So I think those are some of the things that, I think it would be unlikely. I think, we certainly would encourage them to be as positive in terms of trying to encourage that and engage maybe family who have written letters of support. But it would be unlikely that between getting him moved, because he's going to have to go to another facility to do SUD. I don't think we would see him much before 20 months, just to be honest. That would be hard. So, okay, we have a motion and a second by roll call vote. Board Member Bray.
Yes.
Board Member Earhart abstains. Board Member Larson.
Yes.
Board Member Ramstad.
Yes.
Board Member Nelson.
Yes.
Board Member Strufert.
Yes.
And Schnell votes yes. It's unanimous vote. The motion prevails. We'll communicate that with him.
Seconded. Sorry.
Did we have we had a motion?
First made the motion. It's a second. Sorry.
Did we have a second? Okay. Done. Yeah.
He meant to second it.
He meant
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure.
Looking at the wrong camera still.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've taken care of the other business around the meeting minutes. Is there anybody signed up for public comment? No public comment. The next full meeting of the Supervised Release Board is January 28th, 25, starting at 11:15. It will be here. And with that, I would entertain a non-debatable motion for adjournment.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And we are adjourned.
Didn't miss that one.
Tuesday meeting will be in this room, the 14th, for those of you who can come, meeting, training.